Before I begin my somewhat formal remarks, walking in here today and seeing you guys sitting on that beam, first local ever to endorse me was a guy named Tommy Schrank in Ellesmere, Delaware, local ironworkers, and asked me to come out to a site. It took me up on an elevator outside, and there's four of them crazy sons of guns like y'all sitting having their lunch on a beam, I guess about 12 stories above the ground. You're nuts. Thank God you are. I tell you what, you gotta not only have some brains, but you gotta be coordinated to be an iron worker, man. And I was told that they said, you know, they've done a cutout of number 46, the presidency. I'm the 46th president. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I can take it home. That's solid steel, man. And you guys did that on your time. Well, thank you very much. I'm not going to try to take it home. Well, look, folks, it really is, it's an honor to be here, for real. And I want to thank your soon-to-be new, full-blown, full-bore iron worker. Marty's already trying to get her to Boston, but that's another thing I got to warn you about. But folks, look, it's an honor to be here with Vice President Harris and with Labor Secretary Marty Walsh, a proud member and former president of Labor's local union 223 up in Boston, and our Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm. Got a few things we're going to build, and I want to thank the Maryland delegation, Ben Cardin, who's been a friend for a long time, and Chris Van Hollen, who's a really close friend and outstanding Congressman, Anthony Brown, and other elected officials that are here. Look, all of whom fight for working people in Maryland and every other state, because if it happens here, it happens around the world, it happens around the country. It's been an honor to be with the iron workers of Local 5, and we talk about building a future that's made in America. We're talking about you. And this time we're going to get it really correct. You know, one of the press persons said to me, and I can't remember who, about 3 months ago, that I don't know if it's factual or not, but he said, you've used the word union as president more than any other president in American history. Well, let me tell you. I'm not sure that's true, but I tell you what, I promised you you'd have a union president, and I am, because you're the best. You know, we talk about whether, you know, Wall Street built America. They're good folks in Wall Street. They're not bad folks. They're good people all over the country. I'll tell you who built America, the middle class. And the people who built the middle class are organized labor, unions did. That's not hyperbole. That's a fact. That's a straight fact. And the executive order I'm going to sign today is going to help ensure that we build a better America, we build it right, and we build it on time, and we build it cheaper than it would have been otherwise. You know, the executive order is making sure that federal construction projects get completed on time and under budget, saving taxpayers money, clearing construction zones quickly, and ensuring that everything the federal government signs to contract to build is built to last. You guys really genuinely are the best in the world. That's not hyperbole, it's a fact. To do that, we're using a tool that iron workers here know very well, called project labor agreements. I know you all know it, but folks who may be watching this may not fully understand it. Simply put, these agreements that contractors, subcontractors, and unions put in place before a construction site gets underway, before the construction begins. They ensure that major projects are handled by well-trained, well-prepared, highly skilled workers. And they ward off problems. They resolve disputes ahead of time, ensuring safer work sites, avoiding disruptions and work stoppages that can cause expensive delays down the line. And that makes a big difference for the American taxpayer, because when big construction projects are completed efficiently and with the highest degree of professionalism, it's good for the American taxpayer. That's not hyperbole, that's a fact. We don't talk about it, though. We don't talk about how y'all save the American taxpayers money. It's good for families who live in those communities all across the country, where federal construction projects are being built as I speak. And it means that modernization of your local waterways will get done sooner, won't cost twice as much as expected. And when the next storm comes, the power will more likely stay on and homes and business will be better protected from flooding. It means new air traffic control towers at the local airports will be up and running more quickly, so flights are safer at the airports and more efficient. It means new housing will be built on our military bases will be of the highest quality which these service members deserve. And will hold up better and make life easier for our military families. The executive order I'm going to sign will help diffuse problems before they arise. They're going to improve coordination between contractors, subcontractors, and workers on the job site. It's going to help guarantee a consistent supply of high-quality, highly trained workers. You know, what people don't understand if don't know the industry is, you know, it's like you going to college, kid, 4 years. 4 years of busting your neck learning a trade. This isn't something you walk up and show up in a day and you raise your hand, I need a job. You work like the devil for it. Fortunately, you get paid while you're doing it. You're able to do it. But it is an education, full-blown education you're getting in your trade. Well, you have a voice on the work site, full commitment to getting the job done. And it's going to raise the bar on quality for some of those vital projects we're going to be building. And we're going to make sure that federal construction projects are staffed with good-paying union jobs. One of you actually came up to me today and said, Joe, you said you were going to do that, and you're doing it. Well, when President Obama asked me to run the Recovery Act, I made sure every single job I could get was a union job, prevailing wage. Because I've noticed when folks are getting paid a decent wage, everybody in the community does better. Everything looks better. They're jobs you can raise a family on. Or as my dad would say, they're jobs you can put your head in the pillow at night and just have a little breathing room, a little security, a little breathing room. Jobs that can't be outsourced. That's good for nearly 200,000 workers on federal construction contracts right now. It's good for everybody. I don't want to get going because I have to keep you here too long, because you know all what I've said, and you know what I've done, and you know what we're doing, and I know what you're doing. But let me close with this. A week ago, I went to Pittsburgh to tour a former steel mill. It's now a cutting-edge manufacturing research and development hub. Right before I left for the trip, I got word that a bridge collapsed. You saw it on television. It looked as bad in person as it did at the time. The bridge had been rated in poor condition, like, I might add, over 3,000 bridges in Pennsylvania, 45,000 across the nation. It's been rated that way for the last 10 years. When I got there, folks told me something close to a miracle had occurred. Because of a snowstorm that morning, school openings were late and commutes were delayed. So when that bridge collapsed, and it was well over 100 feet off the almost, I don't know the exact, but probably from down to the creek where it went over and the ravine, probably a couple hundred feet. When it collapsed, instead of a bus with a couple people on it being packed with school buses full of children, the people on their way to work and the bridge that is one of the busiest bridges. You know, there are more bridges in Pittsburgh than any other city in the world, with the three rivers. The bridge was empty, relatively empty. Fortunately, no one was killed. but for a snowstorm. Just imagine the challenges we face and the opportunities to build a better America and extend far beyond roads and bridges now that we can know we have to do. We passed that infrastructure bill. But it's not just that. Across the country right now, there are countless buildings, ports, airports, power stations, and other federal construction projects that need to be modernized and built for the future. We can't count on miracles like happened out in Pittsburgh, prevent tragedies that are waiting in plain sight. But we can count on what America's always counted on, the American worker, the hardest working, best trained workers in the world. American workers who've given just half a chance have never, ever let their country down and gotten the job done. And that's what this day's all about, in my view. Getting the job done for the American taxpayers. Getting the job done right the first time. You know, folks, there's a law that's existed for a long time, but has too many exceptions like this one had. And that is that Buy American. As President of the United States, I award contracts, and I'm now making it the case, and we're working, it's one of the reasons those jobs are up, is unless the product I'm purchasing for the American people was made in America and all of its component parts were made in America, we ain't buying it. We're just simply not buying it. And what's going to happen here, not a joke, it's a fact, it's not a violation of any international laws either. What we're talking about here, with three exceptions I won't bore you with, and they're highly unusual, with three exceptions, every single project that we're talking about that's paid for with federal dollars and it's a federal project, it's going to be union jobs, every single one of them. Last time we tried it, there were so many exceptions, I think only 19, 20 jobs. There are going to be thousands of people put to work. Not a joke. I mean, this is serious. And guess what? The American public is going to be safer. And it's going to be cheaper. Cheaper paying the right wage and the right trained people to begin with. Get the job done right and on time. So I'm about to walk over and sign an executive order that's going to make that happen. And we're going to start once that order is signed. Just remember, it ain't labor, it's unions. Thank you. Now, usually you have a pen to give out to everybody around you. But we didn't have enough pens to bring with us. So I'm going to sign this order, but you're all going to get one of the signing pens, starting with the Maryland delegation. There you go. Well, Gretchen, thank you. And are they your two children? Stand up so everybody can see you. Who's that guy in front of you? Is that Dad? Just remember, moms you get along with, you can work it out, but dads are hard to raise. Be patient with us, okay? Well, look, Gretchen, thank you very much. You know, you went from speaking to millions to speaking for millions and speaking for a movement. You remind us that even a powerful job didn't protect you from having to contend, you're over this side, I'm sorry, for having to contend with so much you had to face. And to all the other courageous survivors, there's 4 here today. Would you all stand up? You're the survivors who led to this historic reform. And thank you, thank you, thank you on behalf of my daughter, my granddaughters, all my family. Thank you so very much. Between half and three-quarters of all women report that they have faced some form of sexual harassment in the workplace. And too often, they're denied a voice and a fair chance to do anything about it. Today, we send a clear and strong message that we stand with you for safety, dignity, and for justice. In my State of the Union, I said I disagreed with the notion that we can't work together on important things. Last year, I signed 80 bipartisan bills into law, from preventing government shutdowns to reforming the military justice system, as Kristen knows very well, on a whole range of issues relating to how women are treated. Today, I'm proud to sign another bipartisan bill into law, and I want to thank the many champions of this bill, the Vice President, Representative and old friend Sherry Bustos. Good to see you, Sherry. And Ken Buck, Morgan Griffith, Pamela Jayapal. Where is she? There you are. Good to see you. And Senators Kristen Gillibrand and Lindsey Graham. By the way, Lindsey used to be a really close friend. I'm going to work on it again. And Dick Durbin, and I'm leaving so many people out. But look, for the folks at home, here's what this law is going to do. Time and again, women and sometimes men are forced and faced sexual harassment and assault on the job. And it took that courageous step to reporting when it happened. And some of them, when they did, they found out that reporting harassment behavior triggered a part of an employment contract they had never seen, they didn't even know existed, that they were powerless to change. A mechanism called forced arbitration. Forced arbitration is in court. In fact, forced arbitration prevents survivors from going to court. And under forced arbitration proceedings are conducted in secret, often by arbitrators selected and paid for by the employer. And the outcomes of the arbitration are usually hidden from the public and the employees and coworkers, and they usually can't even, and they can't be appealed or can't be overturned. In some arbitration clauses, you can't even acknowledge that you're bringing the claim. And parenthetically, employers can still forbid people from talking about what happened to them through non-disclosure clauses. And I think that should be changed as well, but that's another day. When it comes to sexual harassment and assault, forced arbitration shielded perpetrators, silenced survivors, enabled employers to sweep episodes of sexual assault and harassment under the rug, and it kept survivors from knowing if others have experienced the same thing in the same workplace at the hands of the same person. And yes, there will be cases where victims want their claims resolved in private, but some survivors will want their day in court. And that should be their choice and nobody else's choice. I know there's discussion in Congress about whether forced arbitration clauses should also be banned for other kinds of employment disputes beyond sexual harassment and assault. I think it's all wrong, and they should be banned. But that doesn't cover it here. Giving the employer absolute power to decide isn't how justice is supposed to work. It should be the choice of the employee about whether they want to go to court or not. I've made clear that my belief that is no worker should have to make a commitment before any dispute has arisen to give their access to justice in the courts when they believe a right has been violated. 60 million American workers are bound by forced arbitration clauses that were included in the fine print of their contracts, and many don't even know that they exist. You might have signed one without knowing it. I strongly believe no worker should have to make such a commitment, and that's why I support legislation in the House of Representatives that's going to consider in the coming weeks that would prohibit mandatory arbitration of all types of employment disputes. But look, but today marks an important step in an effort to ban mandatory pre-dispute arbitration clauses that takes the power to choose how to pursue justice away from the worker. And I'm glad that there was a broad bipartisan support and unanimity in the United States Senate that we should never be forced there should never be a forced arbitration clause for sexual harassment and/or assault. And folks, this is, I think, a momentous day for justice and fairness in the workplace. And for those who experience sexual harassment or assault, you're going to have the right today that you did not have yesterday. And that's good news. And by the way, I'd also argue that it was also good for the employers, as you mentioned. And I think it is good for the employers. If a worker experiences sexual assault or harassment, it's in the employer's best interest to address it. Many times the employer may not know. And to make sure it never happens again, employers can't successfully compete for the best workers if the workplace practices are unsafe and unjust. Employers, it puts you on the right side of the workers. And as Gretchen said, it puts you on the right side of history. And so, on behalf of the workers of today, on behalf of my daughter, on behalf of my granddaughters and grandchildren, and with gratitude for the bravery of so many women who, by speaking out, have made the workplace fairer and safer for others, I'm now going to step over here and sign this bill. And by the way, it's my hope that with the support of all the members of Congress here, I look forward to signing legislation to strengthen and renew the Violence Against Women Act. Which I first wrote and championed 3 decades ago. So folks, it's time to get that passed too. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to walk over and sign this legislation. And invite up.
I can survive it. You're doing good. Congratulations, Mr. President.
All right. And usually you have a pen for everybody. I promise you're all going to get one. All right? Now the wall. Don't jump. Thank you. Please sit down. Well, thank you not only for being here, but for what you did. I want to thank the Vice President Harris and the congressional leaders who are here today. You know, in a moment I'm going to sign this bipartisan government funding bill. But with this bill, we're going to send a message to the American people. A strong message that Democrats and Republicans can actually come together and get something done, right, Nance? And to fulfill our most basic responsibilities. To keep the government open and running for the American people, serving the American people, investing in your communities, and investing in the American people and doing it in a fiscally responsible way. This bill also includes historic funding, $13.6 billion, to address Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the impact on surrounding countries. Putin's aggression against Ukraine has united people all across America, united our two parties in Congress, and united freedom-loving world. And it's an act with urgency and resolve that we're doing right now that you've provided me the ability to do. I want to thank the congressional leadership for working so quickly to make sure we have the resources we need, economic, humanitarian, and security, to continue our forceful response to this crisis. We've already committed more than $1.2 billion in security assistance to the people of Ukraine just over the past year. And I know all of you know that. It's preaching to the choir here. But we've been providing anti-armor, taking out tanks, anti-air capabilities directly to the Ukrainian forces. And we're also facilitating significant shipments of security assistance from our allied partners to Ukraine. With this new security funding and the drawdown authorities in this bill, we're moving urgently to further augment the support to the brave people of Ukraine as they defend their country. And I'll have much more to say about this tomorrow, about exactly what we're doing in Ukraine. We're also going to be better positioned to provide for the rapidly growing humanitarian needs of the Ukrainian people. This war has turned nearly 3 million Ukrainians into refugees, with numbers growing every single day. And that's on top of the 12 million people who require humanitarian assistance inside of Ukraine. The United States is helping to lead the global humanitarian response with our partners in Europe and well beyond Europe. In just the past few weeks, we provided nearly $293 million in humanitarian assistance to people in Ukraine and in neighboring countries. Our experts are on the ground in Poland and in neighboring countries where the Vice President just came back from to make real-time assessments of a rapidly evolving crisis, to get urgently needed humanitarian supplies to the people in need now. We're airlifting emergency relief supplies into staging positions in the region, supplies like high thermal blankets, water treatment equipment, so that they can be shipped into Ukraine. We're providing essentials like soap and laundry detergent, simple sounding things to refugees who fled with literally nothing but the clothing on their backs. We're working with partners to supply access to safe drinking water and to food rations to the people affected by this conflict. With U.S. support, the World Food Program has already purchased 20,000 metric tons of food to address the growing needs of individuals affected by this conflict. It's exceedingly difficult to get supplies into Ukraine while the Russian onslaught continues, but we're managing to get supplies into Ukraine regularly thanks to the bravery of so many frontline workers who are still at their post. And we are supporting food assistance at refugee reception centers in frontline countries like Moldova. With billions more included in this bill for new humanitarian assistance, we're going to be able to quickly ramp up our response and help alleviate the suffering that Putin's war is causing the Ukrainian people and the region. This bill also provides necessary economic support for Ukraine and Ukraine's neighbors that are impacted by this war. Things like loan guarantees, direct financial support, including to address the needs like energy and cybersecurity. This bill is also going to help face our challenges here at home. It sends a clear message to the American people that we're investing in safety, health, and the future of Americans. Let me just mention a couple of the highlights, starting with community safety. We know what works to make our communities safer, and that's investing in prevention and community police officers so that they can walk the streets, know the neighborhoods, and who can help restore trust and safety in the communities. The answer is not to abandon our streets or to choose between safety and equal justice. It's in this funding bill which we make sure we do both. This budget invests in funding for agencies like the FBI and U.S. Marshals, the Drug Enforcement Agency, but also includes funding for COPS programs to increase community policing and the ability of the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms to tackle gun crime, and it funds entirely new community violence intervention programs just at the Department of Justice. Community violence interruption programs are programs where trusted community members work directly with the people who are most likely to commit or become victims of gun crimes. I had a chance to meet with those leaders in one of the programs in New York City not long ago. I saw the difference they were making every day. We know these programs can dramatically reduce violence, and we're going to fund a lot more of them. This bill also includes grants for state and local law enforcement and crime prevention programs. We're talking about drug treatment programs, school violence prevention programs, programs where people who might end up in prison instead get mandatory mental health care that they need. Part of the safety before any crime is committed. Part of the safety is the ability to feel safe from gender-based violence. I wrote a Violence Against Women Act with many in this room years ago, 28 years ago, to provide protection against domestic violence, stalking, sexual assault, and to support survivors and help them find a way out of those abusive situations they were locked into because they had no means to leave, with support for rape crisis centers as well as housing and legal assistance. The law has saved lives, And that's helped women rebuild their lives and make children a heck of a lot safer. Today, with this bill, we reauthorize and strengthen the Violence Against Women Act. For example, we're doing more to help survivors in rural areas and in underserved communities. Tribal courts will now be able to exercise jurisdiction over non-native perpetrators of sexual assault and sex trafficking. And we're providing more support for legal services and for law enforcement to get the training they need to help handle the trauma survivors are experiencing. I'll have more to say about the Violence Against Women Act tomorrow as well. We're going to be able to fund significant areas in common ground in this bill, especially in areas that I call in my State of the Union address a unity agenda. The things that we can accomplish together, Democrats and Republicans. Two elements of that agenda are, one, beat the opioid epidemic, and two, take on the challenges of mental health, which have been exacerbated because of the COVID problem. This bill supports opioid response grants that are funding that we provide to states to support opioid prevention, treatment, and recovery services. We also included funding for states and support mental health services, as well as additional funding for children's mental health services, which has increased exponentially. I've also called for increasing Pell Grants to make colleges more affordable. And that is, anyone making less than $50,000 a year, they're eligible for a Pell Grant. This bill delivers increasing the maximum Pell Grant by $400, which will make a difference in a lot of lives. And I'd like to add a word about another investment this bill makes, one that I expect will pay dividends for hope, healing, and for our economy for generations to come. And it's called ARPA-H, Advanced Research Project Agencies of Health. This will be a new kind of entity, an engine for innovation, a place where we'll do the high-risk, high-reward research that can drive unprecedented progress in biomedicine. It's based on DARPA, the Defense Department's Advanced Research Project Agency, that has led to breakthroughs in technologies that protect our national security, like the Internet, GPS, and so much more. ARPA-H will have a singular purpose: to drive breakthroughs to prevent, detect, and treat diseases including cancer, Alzheimer's and diabetes, and other diseases. And by the way, we're proving that we can invest in the American people in a fiscally responsible way. Last year, the deficit dropped for the first time since 2015. It fell by $360 billion last year. And this year, it's on track to drop by more than $1 trillion. After 4 years in a row of increasing deficits before I took office, we're now on a track to see the largest ever decline in the deficit in American history. Let me close with this. Today, we're again showing the American people that as a country, we can come together as Democrats, Republicans, and Independents and do big things. That our democracy can deliver and outperform autocracies. And that there's nothing we can't do when we do it together as the United States of America. So I'd like to now invite up my Budget Director, Shalonda Young, and all the members of the Congress here today while we sign this bipartisan government funding bill. Thank you all very much.
I'm next to you, Shalonda.
Ready?
They got names. Yeah, that's names.
Oh, wait a minute. Where's Nancy?
Excuse
me.
Speaker. There you go. Now, I know we usually hand out pens to everyone who's done this, but you're all going to get a pen, but we didn't have 15 pens up here, so I'm going to make sure you get it when we finish.
I want to make sure my signature is legible.
Well, it is, Pat.
How faint mine is and how dark his is.
Yeah, I know. I tell you what, Nancy. Anyway, I'm going to give it a shot here, okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Give the pen to Shalanda. Shalanda, you get it.
Thank you, sir.
I just signed into law the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, making lynching a federal hate crime for the first time in American history. I want to thank Vice President Harris, who was a key co-sponsor of this bill when she was a United States Senator. And I also want to thank Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer and members of the Congress here today, especially Congressman Hoyer, Bobby Rush, Senator Dick Durbin, and Cory Booker. I also want to thank Senator Tim Scott, who couldn't be here today, and the civil rights leaders gathered here today, and most of all, the family of Emmett Till and Ida B. Wells. Thank you for never giving up, never, ever giving up. Matter of fact, granddaughter told me that her mother was here when? And your grandmother was here when?
In 1898.
In 1898, in order to make a case for the anti-lynching law. It was over 100 years ago, in 1900, a North Carolina representative named George Henry White, the son of a slave, the only black lawmaker in Congress at the time, who first introduced legislation to make lynching a federal crime. Hundreds of similar bills have failed to pass. Over the years, several federal hate crime laws were enacted, including one I signed last year to combat COVID-19 hate crimes. But no federal law expressly prohibited lynching, none, until today. One of the leading chronicles of our history of the lynching is Brian Stevenson, who happens to be a Delawarean from my home state, who wanted very much to be here today, but he could not. He helped build a National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, America's first site dedicated to understanding the legacy of lynching. You know, his extensive research showed that between 1877 and 1950, more than 4,400 black people were murdered by lynching, most in the South, but some in the North as well. That's a lot of folks, man, and a lot of silence for a long time. Lynching was pure terror to enforce the lie that not everyone belongs in America, not everyone is created equal. Terror to systematically undermine hard-fought civil rights. Terror, not just in the dark of the night, but in broad daylight. Innocent men, women, and children hung by nooses from trees, bodies burned and drowned and castrated. Their crimes? Trying to vote, trying to go to school, trying to own a business or preach the gospel. False accusations of murder, arson, and robbery. Simply being black. Often the crowds of white families gathered to celebrate the spectacle, taking pictures of the bodies and mailing them as postcards. Emmett Till was an only child. He grew up in the south side of Chicago with his mother Mamie and grandparents and cousins. In the summer of 1955, Emmett turned 14 years old, ready to start 8th grade in the fall. Before school started, he wanted to visit his cousins in Mississippi. So Emmett's mom dropped him off at the train station in Chicago. Her own family fled the Delta decades earlier, so she told him the unwritten rules she had to follow. Quote, be very purpose through your pain. To find purpose through your pain. But the law is not just about the past. It's about the present and our future as well. From the bullets in the back of Ahmaud Arbery to countless other acts of violence, countless victims known and unknown. The same racial hatred that drove the mob to hang a noose brought that mob carrying torches out of the fields of Charlottesville just a few years ago. Racial hate isn't an old problem. It's a persistent problem. A persistent problem. And I know many of the civil rights leaders here know, you heard me say it 100 times. Hate never goes away. It only hides. It hides under the rocks. And given just a little bit of oxygen, it comes roaring back out, screaming. But what stops it is all of us, not a few. All of us have to stop it. People like Ida B. Wells, one of the founders of the NAACP, established 100 years ago in response to racial terror across the country. A brilliant, gifted writer. She exposed the barbaric nature of lynching as a tool to intimidate and subjugate Black Americans. In her words, her courage, her convictions, she was trying to prevent the murders of Emmett Till and Ahmaud Arbery, so many others, over 4,400 others. Ida B. Wells once said, quote, "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon the wrongs." Turn the light of truth upon the wrongs. That's what all of you have done gathered in this rose garden with this bill and so much more, including Ida B. Wells' great-granddaughter, Michelle Duster, whom I'm honored to introduce to mark this historic day. Michelle, welcome to the White House and welcome to the podium. As my mother would say, God love you, dear. You know, Annette, as you were speaking, looked down at Senator Carper, who used to be chairman of this committee. How many years, Tommy, you working on this? 400. I tell you what, your service both in the Air Force as a letter carrier is real, and it's all about serving your community, and I appreciate it very much. Matter of fact, when I said, it's good to meet you, she said, I know you, we've met before. And I said, I apologize. She said, you used to show up in Wilmington. Well, how often?
In D.C.
Oh, in D.C.
Every year.
Every year I'd show up to letter carriers, breakfast or lunch or dinner, I can't remember which. But it reminded me why I think foreign policy is easier. War and peace goes down easier, Jerry, I think. Senator Peters, Senator Portman, Senator Carper, Senator Tillis, Representatives Maloney, Comer, Conley, and Virginia Fox, and Stephen Lynch. Stevie, good to see you, pal. I didn't know you did post offices. And Brenda Lawrence, who served the U.S. Postal Service for 30 years before being elected to Congress, which was harder. Well, look, some of you know, before I became president, I'm sure you all know this, I was the Ben Franklin Professor of Practice at the University of Pennsylvania. Professor, Jim, you know. And everybody walks in, they wonder why Ben Franklin's picture is hanging in my portrait's hanging in my office. Because if I didn't put that up, there'd be nobody I knew would get into the University of Pennsylvania again. I'm only kidding, that's a joke. But Ben Franklin, one of our founding fathers, was our first Postmaster General. And he saw the Postal Service in a way to connect the colonies and to build together as one nation. I mean, literally, that's what it was seen as. It was to connect the colonies and build one nation, connect everything. He saw the power of the Postal Service to deliver more than the mail, but some of our most basic freedoms and basic rights were delivered by the Post Office. Freedom of speech by allowing citizens to voice and their voices to be amplified all across the country. Freedom of the press by offering discounted rates for newspapers. The right to privacy by expressly prohibiting, this sounds silly, but expressly prohibiting the opening of mail that belonged to somebody else. And beyond those rights and freedoms, our oldest postal roads helped give rise to some of our nation's most essential infrastructure. There are postal highways. That's why a lot of these roads were built to provide postal. And by the way, we used to serve with a guy who was from West Virginia, Jennings Randolph. And he started an airline. But the way the airlines used to work was there'd be they'd put up two big poles like goalposts, and they would put a wire between it, and they'd hang whatever the postal service, the post mail used to be collected, and the airplane would come down with a hook on it and pick it up and take it off. So, I'm not going to say if Jennings were here, he'd say there'd be no post office out there. But anyway, I'm only kidding. But today, more than 75,000 dedicated women and men of the U.S. Postal Service continue to deliver for the American people. They keep us healthy by shipping 4 million prescriptions per day, 4 million per day. And when we're dedicated, when we dedicated to send and committed, we would send to free to COVID-19 tests directly to people's homes. The Postal Service stepped up to make that happen as well. And now they've delivered over 320 million COVID test 19 kits so far in every state, territory, and U.S. military base in the world. Impressive turnaround or an unprecedented task. It's continuing to truly heroic service that they provided throughout this pandemic. When everyone was worried about the supply chain delays would ruin the holidays, the post office delivered the packages that more than any other shipper in the world, and they got the gifts to our homes and our loved ones on time. And the Postal Service is central to our economy and essential to rural America, delivering mail and packages between small businesses and customers every single solitary day. And the deliveries, and delivering seeds and even live animals, often to parts of the country that private carriers can't or won't or aren't required to reach. And there's another essential thing the Postal Service delivers: your vote. In 2020, 43% of the votes cast by ballot were cast by mail. And on average, it took those ballots. On average, it took those ballots less than 2 days to get from the voter to the election office, faster than the average delivery time for first-class mail. So it's no exaggeration to say that the Postal Service delivers democracy. And there's no exaggeration to say the Postal Service is essential as it ever was, has ever been, today. In 2006, the law required Postal Service to prepay retirement benefits 50 years into the future. No other company or federal agency has do anything like that. And the requirement of that law stretched the Postal Service's finances almost to the breaking point, and with real consequences. There are stories of people across the country getting hit with late fees because their credit card bill arrived a week late, if it arrived at all. Small businesses on the verge of collapse because payments they were counting on were severely delayed. Elderly Americans suffering because they had to go weeks without their medication. I, like many of you, made a campaign promise to fix this. And today we are. You all, the members in front of me, did all the work. I made the promise, you did all the work. And I'm glad that strong bipartisan majorities in the House and Senate have come together to deliver on this needed reform. With this bill, we're repealing the pre-funding mandate and setting the Postal Service on a more sustainable and stable financial footing. We're guaranteeing that the mail will continue to be delivered 6 days a week, and the bill increases transparency by requiring the Postal Service to develop an online public dashboard, updated weekly with local and national service performance data. You'll be able to see in real time how well the Postal Service is delivering for you and for your community. And this bill streamlines health care for postal workers as well. They deliver for us, so through rain and snow and sleet, and we're making sure that health care they need will be there for them as well. And finally, this bill will allow the Postal Service to partner with state, local, and tribal governments to offer valuable and helpful non-postal services to the public. Imagine a trip to the post office where you can pick up your bus pass or your hunting license or your fishing license. Of course, there are more areas where we want to see the Postal Service leading. For example, it needs to do more to modernize and electrify its fleet of vehicles to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to save money. We're going to do that. And I'll continue to fight for these common sense improvements, but today we enshrine in law our recognition that the Postal Service is fundamental to our economy, to our democracy, to our health, and the very sense of who we are as a nation. And this bill recognizes the Postal Service as a public service, and we're ensuring that it can continue to serve all Americans for generations to come. Now, I'm now going over and sign that postal bill, and those of you who are going to come up while I sign it, I'm not going to read out your names. They told me who you are. Everybody but Stenny can come. Only kidding, Stenny. And we'll get this reform bill finally signed, and Tommy, it only took, what, 11 years? 12 years. Rob, and that's pretty fast, right? Anyway, all kidding aside, thank you for the hard work you've done. You've done a good job. Let me walk over here. We got markers for everybody here. Hey, Jim, how you doing? Doing well. Now, by the way, instead of handing out pens today, you know, you're all getting these pens.
Nice.
Because I can't. You ready?
We're so ready.
I told her it'd be nice to you and still vote for you. All right. All right, it's official. Welcome, folks. Today I'm joined by Senator Cardin, Ben Cardin, Lisa Slotkin, and Congresswoman Victoria Spartz, who I was just talking to her about her daughter and family back in Ukraine. God love you. I'm about to sign a bill that these folks are responsible, and of course the Vice President, I'm signing a bill that provides another important tool in our efforts to support the government of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people in their fight to defend their country and their democracy against Putin's brutal war. And it is brutal. I want to thank members of Congress here for getting this passed and everyone who supported the bill. And the bill demonstrates the support for Ukraine is pivotal at this moment. Every day Ukrainians pay with their lives and they fight along and the atrocities that the Russians are engaging in are just beyond the pale. And the cost of the fight is not cheap, but caving to aggression is even more costly. That's why we're staying in this. Yesterday we celebrated VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, marking the end of a transition of the devastation as a consequence of World War II, and Allied nations defeated the scourge of fascism in Europe. And today, Europe is honoring another important day, an anniversary. On May 9th, 1950, just years after the end of World War II, Europe began to work to strengthen the bonds of unity among the nations, particularly economic unity and the shared economic prosperity. The idea ultimately grew into what is now 27-nation European Union, an economic powerhouse and a global force for peace and close partners on all the issues we face. And it really has, I've said from the very beginning, it's something that is good for everyone. It brings these countries together in ways that when they cooperate closely economically, they also cooperate in other ways. And you're seeing it in their support for Ukraine. And with Putin's war once more bringing wanton destruction into Europe and to reaffirm the enduring commitment to the future grounded in democracy, human rights, and peaceful resolution of disagreements, I'm now going to sign this bill. And again, I thank the colleagues who are standing behind me, and because it really matters. It matters. There you go. Done. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Here, thanks, please. Thank you all. Vice President Harris, before we begin, let me say a few words about what happened in Uvalde, Texas, elementary school. Since I spoke last night, the confirmed death toll has tragically climbed, including another teacher and three more students. Jill and I will be traveling to Texas in the coming days to meet with the families and let them know we have a sense, just a sense of their pain, and hopefully bring some little comfort to the community in shock, in grief, and in trauma. As a nation, I think we all must be there for them, everyone. And we must ask, when in God's name will we do what needs to be done to, if not completely stop, fundamentally change the amount of the carnage that goes on in this country? To state the obvious, and Corey and a lot of other people here, I'm sick and tired. I'm just sick and tired of what's going on and continues to go on. I spent my career as chairman of the Judiciary Committee and as vice president working for common sense gun reforms, as I said, as a senator and a vice president. While they clearly will not prevent every tragedy, we know certain ones will have significant impact and have no negative impact on the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is not absolute. When it was passed, you couldn't own a cannon. You couldn't own certain kinds of weapons. It's just always been limitations. But guess what? These actions we've taken before, they saved lives, and they can do it again. The idea that an 18-year-old can walk into a store and buy weapons of war designed and marketed to kill is, I think, just wrong. It just violates common sense. Even the manufacturer, the inventor of that weapon, thought that as well. You know, where's the backbone? Where's the courage to stand up to a very powerful lobby? But here's one modest step. The federal agency that measures and ensures that gun laws are enforced and the Second Amendment is abided by, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Explosives, the AFT, has not had a Senate confirmation leader for 7 years because of these disputes. For 7 years, been out without anyone in charge. I nominated a supremely qualified former prosecutor who has broad bipartisan support from law enforcement and the community overall. His hearing was held earlier today, I should say. The Senate should confirm him without delay, without excuse, send the nomination to my desk. It's time for action. We're here today for the same purpose, to come together and say enough, to act. We must. Vice President Harris and members of the Cabinet, members of the Congress, civil rights leaders, law enforcement officers and officials, distinguished guests, especially the families missing a piece of their soul, including the family sitting in front of me and the beautiful young girl who told me, my daddy's going to change history. And he will, honey. He will. They've lost a piece of their soul 2 years ago as well. You know, I know events remembering your loved ones, even though they're met with great reverence, are really hard. Everything's come back as if it was happening yesterday. But in your own ways, you've each of you, whose family's been victimized, have summoned the courage to find purpose through your pain, to stir justice that's been too long dormant, and to give hope while in need of hope yourself. That's why the executive order I'll be signing today is so important in my view. It's a measure of what we can do together to heal the very soul of this nation, to address profound fear and trauma, exhaustion that particularly Black Americans have experienced for generations, and to channel that private pain and public outrage into a rare mark of progress for years to come. 2 summers ago, in the middle of the pandemic, we saw protests across the nation, the likes of which you hadn't seen since the 1960s. They unified people of every race and generation. Athletes and sports leagues boycotted and postponed games. Companies and workers proclaimed Black Lives Matter. Students staged solidarity walkouts. From Europe to the Middle East to Asia to Australia, people saw their own fight for justice and equality, what we were trying to do. The message is clear. Enough. Just enough. And look, almost a year later, almost a year later, a jury in Minnesota stepped up and they found a police officer guilty of murdering George Floyd, with officers and even a police chief taking the stand to testify against misconduct of their colleagues. I don't know any good cop who likes a bad cop. But for many people, including many families here, such accountability is all too rare. That's why I promised as president I would do everything in my power to enact meaningful police reform that is real and lasting. That's why I called on Congress to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. The Senate's in my desk. So I'm asked why I haven't done this executive order earlier. If I'd done it, I was worried it would undercut the effort to get the law passed. This is a call to action based on a basic truth. Public trust, as any cop will tell you, is the foundation of public safety. If they're not trusted, the population doesn't contribute, doesn't cooperate. Two sides of the same coin, inextricably linked. And the principles of fairness and equal justice are at the core of each of them. For the wheels of justice are propelled by the confidence that people have in their system of justice. Without that confidence, crimes will go unreported. Witness fear to come forward. Cases go unsolved. Victims suffer in isolation while perpetrators remain free. And ironically, police are put in greater danger. Justice goes undelivered. Without public trust, law enforcement can't do its job of serving and protecting all of our communities. But as we've seen all too often, public trust is frayed and broken, and that undermines public safety. For the families here today and across the country who have had to ask why this nation, why so many Black Americans wake up knowing they could lose their life in the course of just living their lives today. Simply jogging, shopping, sleeping at home. Whether they made headlines or not, lost souls gone too soon. Members of Congress, including many here today, like Senator Cory Booker and Congressman Karen Bass, alongside members of the Congressional Black Caucus, House and Senate Judiciary Committees, spent countless hours on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to find a better answer to that question. I sincerely thank you all for your tireless efforts, but they're not over. The House passed a strong bill. It failed in the Senate, where our Republican colleagues opposed any meaningful reform. So we got to work on this executive order. It was grounded in key elements of the Justice and Policing Act and reflects inputs of a broad coalition represented here today. Families courageously shared their perspectives on what happened to their loved ones and what we could do to make sure it doesn't happen to somebody else. Civil rights groups and their leaders of every generation who've given their heart and soul to this work provided critical insights and perspectives. The executive order also benefits from the valuable inputs of law enforcement, who put their lives in line every single day to serve. Now let me say, there are those who seek to drive a wedge between law enforcement and the people they serve. Those who peddle the fiction that public trust and public safety are in opposition to one another. We know that's not true, but it occurs. I believe the vast majority of Americans want the same thing: trust, safety, and accountability. The vast majority of law enforcement risk their lives every day to do the right thing. Their families wait for that phone call every time they put on that shield. Just yesterday in Uvalde, brave local officers of the Border Patrol agents intervened to save as many children as they could. Here today, I want to especially thank the International Association of Chiefs of Police, Fraternal Order Police, as well as the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, the Federal Law Enforcement Association, the Police Executive Research Forum, Major Cities Chiefs Association, and others who stepped up and endorsed what we're talking about today. As divided as this nation can feel, today we're showing the strength of our unity. It matters. This executive order is going to deliver the most significant police reform in decades. It applies directly under law to only 100,000 federal law enforcement officers, all the federal law enforcement officers. And though federal incentives and best practices that are attached to it, we expect the order to have significant impact on state and local law enforcement agencies as well. Here are the key parts. First, the executive order promotes accountability. It creates a new national law enforcement and accountability database to track records of misconduct so that an officer can't hide the misconduct. It strengthens the pattern and practice investigation to address systematic misconduct in some departments. It mandates all federal agents wear and activate body cameras while on patrol. Second, the executive order raises standards, bans chokeholds, restricts no-knock warrants, tightens use of force policies to emphasize de-escalation and duty to intervene to stop another officer from using executive force, just as occurred. That didn't occur, but people testified it didn't occur in George Floyd's case. And third, the executive order modernizes policing. It calls for a fresh approach to recruit, train, promote, and retrain law enforcement that's tied to advancing public safety and public trust. Right now, we don't systematically collect data, for instance, on instances of police use of force. This executive order is going to improve that data collection. There's a lot more as well. The bottom line of the executive order includes reforms that have long been talked about or are finally implemented at a federal level. And it comes at a critical time. By building trust, we can strengthen public safety, and we can more effectively fight crime in our communities. And we can do one more thing. We can show what's possible when we work together. Look, I know progress can be slow and frustrating. And there is a concern that the reckoning on race inspired 2 years ago is beginning to fade. But acting today, we're showing that our dear friend, the late John Lewis, Congressman, wrote in his final words after his final march for justice in July of 2020, he said, "Democracy is not a state, it is an act. Democracy is not a state, it's an act, an affirmative act." And today we're acting. We're showing that speaking out matters, being engaged matters, and that the work of our time, healing the soul of this nation, is ongoing and unfinished and requires all of us never to give up, always to keep the faith. I close with this. Over 2 years now, for over 2 years, we've gotten to know one another and pray with one another, not figuratively, literally. I promised the Floyd family, among others, George's name is not just going to be a hashtag. Your daddy's name is going to be known for a long time. That as a nation, we're going to ensure his legacy and the legacy of so many others remembered today. It's not about their death, but what we do in their memory that matters. The purpose just a few moments, I'm going to deliver on that promise when I sign the executive order. And Kamala and I will continue, along with our friends in Congress, to get meaningful police reform legislation to my desk as best we can, as quickly as we can, beyond what we're doing here, affecting states as well, directly. On this day, we're showing the America we know we're a great nation, because the vast majority of us are good people. And there's nothing beyond our capacity, nothing, when we act together as the United States of America. This is a start, a new start. May God bless you all. May God protect our forces. And now I'm going to go sign that executive order. Thank you. You're almost.
Superb job, yeah.
I'm about to sign Advancing Executive Accountable Policing and Criminal Justice Practices to Enhance Public Trust and Public Safety. And since I only have one pen, you're all going to get a copy of this. I don't have to do one stroke at a time with each pen. God willing. Come around. Come on.
Come on up, baby. Come on.
Father's going to change the world.
You're getting so big. Oh, the last time I saw you came up to here. You okay? I'll be darned. My daddy will change the world. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, President.
We're going to go meet some of the family. Okay. Dennis, Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for that introduction, but more importantly, as a lot of the senators here know, for being my friend for a long time. And thank you for joining the administration. You know, when I was forming the administration, I knew Dennis could do any job in the administration. But he wanted to be Secretary of Veterans Affairs because it mattered so much to him. And I think the most important thing to have someone in charge of that department was somebody who cares about what he or she is going to do. I knew he'd pull every lever to deliver results to military veterans and their families. And that's exactly what he's done. I also want to thank all the veteran service organizations that are here today. I'm going to ask you all to stand. I'm not going to read your names out now, but the VA, all the organizations of the veterans organizations, please stand. Thank you. Before we leave today and we finish, I want to thank each one of you personally, because you just keep it going for us. You are the most valuable thing the veterans have. I mean it sincerely. So thank you. We owe you a great deal, and all the families owe you. And the Democratic and Republican sponsors of the bill, especially the leaders of our Veterans Committee, Big John Tester. John, thank you very much, old buddy, and Senator Moran, and thank you, as well as Takano and you know, Washit is also here. Where are you? Where is everybody? There you go. Okay, you have 4 right across. Yeah, okay. I need glasses. When I look out, the only thing I see is Joe Manchin. Hey, Joe, how are you? God, I wish I had Joe's hair. All kidding aside, all friends. Look, you all did so much to make this day possible, all of you. And you're critical to the passage of the PACT Act, which is on the floor right now. And the act would extend benefits and services to those exposed to burn pits and toxic substances during military service, I should say, and we need your support to get it passed. And in my State of the Union address, I laid out a unity agenda of 4 big things that all of us, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, could tackle together as a nation. First was the opioid crisis. Second was mental health. Third was cancer. And the fourth was supporting our veterans. Today, our administration is delivering on that agenda. In just a moment, I'll be signing 9 different bills with overwhelming bipartisan support that improve care for our veterans and honor their service and their sacrifice. And you've heard me say it many times before. Our nation has many obligations. It only has one truly sacred obligation. And I mean it, and I've been saying this for over 35 years, sacred obligation. And that's to prepare and equip those we send into harm's way and to care for them and their families when they come home. It's a sacred obligation because veterans are the backbone, the spine of who we are as a country. Less than 1% of the population risk everything to defend our nation and our values and everything we hold dear. And you know, the 99% of us who don't, we owe them. We owe them big. And that's what today's all about, is paying a debt, in my view. The United States and the State of the Union, I talked about, we need to talk about burn pits that incinerate waste of war, tires, poisonous chemicals, jet fuels, and so much more I won't even mention. Toxic smoke with thick poison spreading through our bases and into the lungs of our troops. And when they came home, many of the fittest and best trained warriors we've ever had were not the same. Headaches, numbness, dizziness, cancer. My son Bo was one of them. Under Secretary McDonough's leadership, the VA is pioneering new ways to link toxic exposure to diseases and to help more veterans get the care they need. Earlier this year, we expanded the eligibility for veterans suffering from 9 rare respiratory cancers. But current law does not entitle all toxic exposed veterans to mammogram services. It does now, until today. The bill I'm signing into law will ensure that veterans who serve near burn pits get the preventative care they need. It's named after Kate Hendricks Thomas. And her husband and her handsome son is here today with 2 cousins. 2 cousins, right? Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming. This guy... And I know when you said you had to go and sit in the front row in front of the president and all the press, you thought, what am I doing? But I'm really glad you're here. We really are. Because at the root of it, Dad, it's all about them. It's all about them. You know, Marie, a military police officer who was deployed in Iraq, diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer from a mammogram. She advocated for women and men in the military to have access to such life-saving screenings. Sadly, she lost her battle in April. gone too soon, but her legacy is going to live on forever. Our hearts are with Dr. Hendricks Thomas's family, and as I said, are here today, and other survivors, other cancer survivors. Another bill improves breast imaging services for veterans regardless of whether they're exposed to burn pits or not. Another extends the law that sunsets next month to compensate Americans who develop cancer and medical conditions from the nation's World War II era nuclear programs. Beyond medical support for our veterans, several other bills honor our members in uniform and those who fought tirelessly on their behalf. The Congressional Medal, Gold Medal, is going to go to U.S. Army Ranger veterans of World War II. Rangers who played a critical role in the D-Day invasion in Normandy, which began 78 years ago yesterday. 78 years ago yesterday. This elite group once numbered 7,000, but now it's down to 12, a dozen left. On behalf of our nation, we want to thank them for their heroism and their service. You know, as a point of personal privilege, it was my honor to sign a bill that will name the new VA outpatient clinic that will be built in Hawaii after a dear friend of mine and a former Senate colleague who I work with, and Maisie's here as well, but Danny Kaka. Danny was a great friend. He was an Army veteran of World War II and a former chair of the Committee on Veterans Affairs. One of the finest people I ever served with. He really was, a man of great honor and integrity. Today, I'm also signing a bill that dedicates a Veterans Center in Utah in honor of Colonel Gail Halverson, known as the Candy Bomber you heard about that Dennis just talked about. And I'm signing a bill that makes it easier to continue honoring veterans who have a building named after them when the VA switches properties. In other words, if there's a named building and the property is being abandoned, whatever building they're moving into, that will take on the same name. We'll have to go through the process of getting it authorized again. The remaining bills focus not just on our veterans' past, but the success of their future. We're going to strengthen the oversight of the VA's activities so veterans get the care they deserve, and restoring educational assistance benefits so veterans displaced by COVID-19 can continue to gain new skills to meet the demands and changing the workforce. Look, let me close with this. Last week, we commemorated Memorial Day. And a reminder that our veterans and our military families represent literally the best of America, the best of America. We can never fully repay the debt to all of you, but I promise that my administration will always have your back. I made that commitment when I ran, and I commit that now, and the men and women sitting before me made a similar commitment. We mean it. This is something we Bidens take personally. Every veteran and family member of a veteran who serves has made our lives, our liberty, and our very nation possible. We owe you. We owe you. And we thank you. May God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. And with that, now I'm going to go and sign those 9 bills. And at some point, I don't know, I'm no longer doing advance work, John, but I got to get you all up here for the signing. We'll work that out. So thank you. And again, kids, thank you for being here, okay? Thank you very much. Maybe I can talk to you afterwards. Will you talk to me later? Okay. All right. Thank you. going to touch you private now. It's a good day to get to sign. I know. Right. Thank you all. Please, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Zippy, and I want to acknowledge Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg is here today and knows a little bit about moving things, and as well as a dozen members of Congress that are here, and both Democrat and Republican. That's the good news. A few months ago, my State of the Union address, part of my plan to lower costs for Americans, I promised to crack down on ocean carriers whose price hikes have hurt American families and American businesses. And today I'm proud to say that we've got that done on a bipartisan basis, and you did it quickly, folks. In just a few minutes, I'm going to be signing the Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022 to put a stop to shipping companies taking advantage of American families, farmers, ranchers, and businesses, and to bring down prices and give the American people a little bit of breathing room, just a little bit more breathing room. You want to know why prices are so high? Well, there are a number of reasons having to do with Putin's war in Ukraine, disruption caused by the pandemic. But one of the factors affecting prices is this: 9 major shipping companies consolidated into 3 alliances control the vast majority of ocean shipping in the world. And each of these 9 is foreign-owned. During the pandemic, these carriers increased their prices by as much as 1,000%. 1,000%. While families and businesses struggled around the world, these carriers made $190 billion in profit in 2021, 7 times higher than the year before. 7 times higher than the year before. And they raked in the profits. And the cost got passed on, as you might guess, directly to the consumers, sticking it to American families and businesses because they could. Furniture, appliances, clothing, anything and everything that crossed the Pacific on a ship from Asia saw a price tag shoot up. And families and businesses felt the squeeze here at home. In addition, these foreign-owned carriers have also been refusing to carry American-made products back to Asia. That's the interesting part. That's where Zippy comes in. There's the Farm Bureau and others. It hurts the entire economy. But it especially hurts our farmers who depend on ocean shipping to sell their products to customers overseas. You know, I knew that we needed to take action right away and put a stop to these dramatic price hikes and end this unfair treatment. And I spoke directly with the CEOs, and not just the 2 that are here today, but from the American Farm Bureau, to find out how it affected them and their customers. And I spoke with the CEO of Joann Stores. Wade is here. Wade, stand up so everybody sees you here. Wade McCollum. And by the way, my sympathies to the family of your CFO, who dropped dead very unexpectedly. My best to their family. It's tough stuff. But you know what he told me? He told me his shipping cost rose by $100 million, more than the company's entire profit margin that year, by $100 million. I spoke to the CEO of Tractor Supply, Hal Lawton. Hal told me that his company went from paying $35 per shipping container to $25,000 per shipping container. I spoke to Zippy, the president of the American Farm Bureau. He shared with me the impact it was having on farmers across the country, so many of whom on markets overseas to sell their crop, rely on markets overseas to sell their products. Hal wasn't able to be with us today, but Wade and Zippy are here today because I wanted them standing right beside me when I signed this legislation into law. What this bill does is extend the authority, something what the federal government calls the Federal Maritime Commission, which a lot of people don't know exists, but it's important, which requires our which regulates our ocean transportation system, allowing them to crack down on these excessive fees and prohibiting ocean carriers from refusing to carry U.S. exports. In short, it's going to help begin to lower shipping costs, bring down prices on everything from goods to goods to products that the American families need, that they make to export as well as import, and ensure that American farmers, ranchers, and other exporters are treated fairly. And I want to thank the bipartisan members of Congress who came together to get this done, especially Senator Amy Klobuchar, a Democrat from Minnesota, John Thune, a Republican from South Dakota, Maria Cantwell, a Democrat from Washington State, John Garamendi, a Democrat from California, Congressman from California, Congressman Dusty Johnson, Republican from South Dakota, Pete DeFazio, Democrat from Oregon, and the committee chairs, ranking members who supported this critical legislation. And you did it so quickly. Thank you, thank you, thank you for working across the aisle and for getting this done so quickly. And I've said many times, tackling inflation is my #1 priority. Inflation, there's no solace as inflation is higher around the rest of the world and gas prices are higher everywhere else in the world. It doesn't matter. It's much too high here. And this bill is going to help bring down inflation, at least marginally, for farmers and businesses all across America. And more than that, the bill is proof of what we can achieve when we work together on common ground. Democrats, Republicans, and independents, farmers, families in this country, businesses of all sizes. We've identified the problem, we identified the solution, and we fixed it together in an overwhelmingly bipartisan way. With a vote of the House very close, 369 to 42. I remember those good old days, man. And no objection to the Senate. I hardly remember those days, and I served there for 36 years. But you know, it's what government can do, can look like at its best. We're going to have real differences, and we should fight like hell when we differ. And some votes are really close, but there's some things that there's just no sense in fighting about. We all basically agree. And what this group of congresspersons have done is they look at it not in terms of whether it's going to help or hurt one party or the other, whether it's right or wrong. And I thank you for doing that. When we come together to solve real problems facing families, we can get a lot done. And I'm proud that we made it happen. Now it's going to be my pleasure to sign this bill into law, and I'd like to invite up Wade and Zippy, Transportation Secretary Buttigieg, the chair of the Maritime Commission, Dan Maffei, as well as all the members of Congress I mentioned to join us on stage. Please, come on up.
Thanks for pointing a Syracusan who hadn't seen the ocean until he was 12.
All right. Here we go. The tradition is you give all the members of Congress who are up here a pen, but we haven't gotten cheap on it. They're going to get a pen in the box. But I'm going to hand this one right over my shoulder here.
Good morning.
Good morning, folks. Yesterday, I spoke about the Supreme Court's shocking decision striking down Roe v. Wade. We've had a lot of discussion about that in our whole household. You think is it? Anyway, Jill and I know how painful and devastating the decision is for so many Americans, and I mean so many Americans. A decision is implemented by states. My administration is going to focus on how they administer it and whether or not they violate other laws, like deciding not to allow people to cross state lines to get public health services. And we're going to take actions to protect women's rights and reproductive health. This morning, though, we're here on a critical issue, gun violence. I'm about to sign into law bipartisan gun safety legislation, and time is of the essence. Lives will be saved. When we return from Europe, Jill and I will be hosting an event in the White House on July 11th to mark this historic achievement with members who voted for these families and the families who, in fact, were victimized by the gun shooting that we've seen. It's so incredible to see so much of it of late. And advocates have worked really hard to do something about it. I've been at this work for a long, long time, and I know how hard it is, and I know what it takes to get it done. I was there 30 years ago, the last time this nation passed meaningful gun safety laws, and I'm here today for the most significant law to be passed since then, for the last 30 years. I'd like to thank the leaders and members of the House and Senate for working together to get this done. I especially want to thank the families that Jill and I, many of whom we sat with for hours on end across the country. So many we've gotten to know who lost their souls to an epidemic of gun violence. They lost their child, their husband, their wife. Nothing is going to fill that void in their hearts. But they led the way, so other families will not have the experience and the pain and trauma that they had to live through. From Columbine to Sandy Hook to Charleston, Orlando, Las Vegas, Parkland, El Paso, Atlanta, Buffalo, Uvalde, and for the shootings that happen every day in the streets that are mass shootings that we don't even hear about. The number of people killed every day in the streets. Their message to us was do something. I don't know how many times we heard that. Just do something. For God's sake, just do something. Well, today, we did. While this bill doesn't do everything I want, it does include actions I've long called for that are going to save lives. It funds crisis intervention, including red flag laws. It keeps guns out of the hands of people who are a danger to themselves and to others. And it finally closes what is known as the boyfriend loophole. So if you assault your boyfriend or girlfriend, you can't buy a gun or own a gun. It requires young people aged 18 to 21 to undergo enhanced background checks. It includes the first ever federal law that makes gun trafficking and straw purchases distinct federal crimes for the first time. It clarifies who needs to register as a federally licensed gun dealer and run background checks before selling a single weapon. This also provides historic funding to address youth mental health crisis in this country, especially the trauma experienced by the survivors of this gun violence. Look, it invests in anti-violence programs that work directly with the people who are most likely to commit these crimes or become victims of gun crimes. Today, we say more than enough. We say more than enough. It's time when this seems impossible to get anything done in Washington. We are doing something consequential. If we can reach compromise on guns, we ought to be able to reach compromise on other critical issues, from veterans' health care to cutting-edge American innovation and so much more. I know there's much more work to do, and I'm never going to give up. But this is a monumental day. God bless us with the strength to continue to work, to get the work that's left undone done, and the lives lost that can't be saved, that are obviously are gone, but will be an inspiration for us to do more. I'm now going to sign this bill into law. God willing, it's going to save a lot of lives. Thank you all so very much.
Mr. President, we take a couple questions.
Thanks. I have a helicopter waiting for me to take off. We're going to have plenty of time to talk about a lot of this.
Do you think the Supreme Court is broken, in your view?
I think the Supreme Court has made some terrible decisions.
But these decisions made on the Supreme Court.
Will you reconsider your previous
Support
opposition to
ending the
expanding the
filibuster.
court, sir? What about term limits for justices?
Today, we received another outstanding jobs report. 528,000 jobs were added just last month to this country's employment. 528,000 jobs. We have now nearly doubled what we're almost at 10 million jobs. Almost at 10 million jobs since I took office. That's the fastest job growth in history. Today, we also matched the lowest unemployment rate in America in the last 50 years, 3.5%. Yes, 3.5%. Today, there are more people working in America than before the pandemic began. In fact, there are more people working in America than any point in American history. You know, what we're also seeing is something that just a few years ago, many experts said was literally impossible: the revitalization of American manufacturing. Since I took office, we've created 642,000 American manufacturing jobs in America. We've seen the biggest and the fastest job recovery in American manufacturing history since the 50s. And some people may have given up on American manufacturing, but the American people didn't, and I know I never did. That's why I made it, "Make it in America," that phrase, "Make it in America," the cornerstone of my economic plan. And today's report proves "Make it in America" isn't just a slogan, it's my administration. It's a reality. I've also made it a priority to bring down the federal deficit. After watching my predecessor every single year increase the debt, the federal deficit, every year for the 4 years he was in office, I said no more. The days of exploding federal deficits are over, and I've kept my word. Just take a look at the facts. The deficit is down a record of $1.7 trillion this year. That's right, 1.7 trillion with a T. And that's on top of $350 billion reduction in the deficit my first year in office. Now, I know people will hear today's extraordinary jobs report and say they don't see it, they don't feel it in their own lives. I know how hard it is. I know it's hard to feel good about job creation when you already have a job and you're dealing with rising prices, food and gas and so much more. I get it. I literally can remember sitting at my mom and dad's dining room table and watching them choose which bills they're going to pay that month, because there wasn't enough money to pay all the bills. I get it. That's why I'm doing everything in my power to lower the cost for families. You know, we've seen some progress. Gas prices are coming down. They're down almost $1 a gallon from where they were just a month ago. And we're making progress. We now have more than 50 straight days of falling gas prices in this country. The price at the pump is now less than $3.99 a gallon in more than half of the gas stations in America. In fact, $3.79 a gallon is now the most common price paid at the pump in the country, $3.79. While we're not there yet, we're on the cusp of passing the most important step we can pass to help Congress to help us lower inflation, the Inflation Reduction Act. That bill will lower prescription drug costs by giving Medicare the power to negotiate for lower drug prices. Lower drug prices. That's something the American people have been promised for years, for decades. and we're on the verge of finally getting that done. The bill also keeps down health care insurance costs by keeping health care premiums for those on the Affordable Care Act down $2,400 a year. It'll make historic investments in clean energy security. The security of the country is at stake. We're going to save American families hundreds of dollars a year on paying their energy bills by allowing them to have money to invest, by allowing them to put in new windows and doors and solar panels and the like, and get tax credits for that. Also going to restore some fairness to the tax code by imposing corporate minimum tax of 15% on billion-dollar companies. That will put an end to what we've seen in recent years, where 55 of the largest companies in America, the Fortune 500, paid zero federal taxes on income over $40 billion combined in profit. This bill is going to reduce the deficit by another $300 billion. And one more point. This bill will not, let me repeat this bill will not raise taxes on anybody making less than $400,000 a year. When it comes to the benefits of this bill, you don't have to take my word for it. Nearly 130 economists, 7 Nobel laureates in economics, I should say, former secretaries of Treasury, former Federal Reserve Vice Chair, former director of the Congressional Budget Office wrote that this bill will, quote, will, quote, fight inflation and lower costs for American families while setting the stage for strong, stable, and broadly shared long-term economic growth. In short, this bill is a game changer for working families and our economy. I look forward to the Senate taking up this legislation and passing it as soon as possible. You know, I know most families are focused on just putting 3 meals on the table, taking care of their kids and paying their bills. Helping you do that is my job. That's the president's job as well. I have one more job, which is not only to focus on getting America through the economic challenge we're facing, but to look to the future, to make sure we're building an economy that meets the needs of American families to be able to succeed and for America to win the future. When you step back, today's jobs report is part of a broader story. For decades, the American economy has been struggling even before the pandemic. Middle-class Americans were working harder, but they were falling further behind. All the rewards of the economy seem to be going to those at the very top. When I came to office, I was determined to change that. I ran for president saying I was going to restore the backbone of America, the middle class, and grow the economy from the bottom up and the middle out, not from the top down. Because when the middle class does well, everybody does well. Everybody. The wealthy do very well. And the poor have a way up. My economic plan rests on 5 pillars. Get America back to work at a record pace. All Americans, leaving no one behind. And we're doing just that. In the process, for the first time in a long time, workers are being empowered. Instead of workers begging employers for work, we're seeing employers have to compete for American workers. And we're seeing the resurgence of worker organizations and unionization. Where I come from, that's a good thing. And it's long overdue. 2, we're literally rebuilding this nation. Our roads, our bridges, our ports, our airports, clean water, high-speed internet for all Americans. For too long, America has failed to invest in itself. We changed that this year with the biggest investment in America since Eisenhower's interstate highway system. We're now committing to rebuild America, not just for tomorrow, but for the next decade. And that includes not only investments in things like roads and bridges, but investments in research and development, the next generation technologies from artificial intelligence to quantum computing to semiconductors. They're all going to remake the world. As I said earlier, we're going to build in America, build it here in America. Let me be clear. We're going to invest it in America. We're going to make it in America. We're going to win the economic competition of the 21st century in America. 3, give working people in the middle class a fighting chance. more than just a little breathing room, a real chance to get ahead by making their everyday things more affordable and accessible, like health care, prescription drug costs, energy, child care, education, housing, and so much more. Because when we lower those costs of all the necessary things, we improve their standard of living. 4, make our economy more competitive and less concentrated. When too few companies dominate a market, that reduces competition, drives up the cost for American consumers. That's been going on for too long. We need to give small business and entrepreneurs more opportunities and consumers more choices at affordable prices. The fifth thing, the fifth pillar, we're going to reward work, not just wealth in America, so that everyone pays their fair share in taxes. I'm a capitalist. I'm not trying to punish anybody, but I'm saying everyone should pay their fair share, just their fair share. America is a nation that was built on work. We can never lose sight of that. That's why the strength and pace of our job recovery is so important. In the past, it's taken years for Americans to recover from an economic crisis that we inherited. And when that's happened, millions of people suffered for years and years just trying to get back to where they were before, just trying to get back on their feet. Well, that didn't happen this time. You know, my dad used to say that a job is about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about your place in the community. It's about being able to look your child in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. That's the economy I'm determined to build today. That's the economy I'm looking at. Now, part of changing the way things have been done in the past is by restoring the faith of the American people in their government. Today, I'm going to be signing very shortly 2 bipartisan bills that began to restore that faith. The key driver of our economic recovery is the resurgence of American small business. Small business hires many people as the major corporations. We just learned last week that small businesses with less than 50 employees created nearly 3 million jobs in 2021. 3 million. That's the most ever in a single year. And more Americans applied to start new businesses than ever before in our history. And part of our plan is making sure that when we commit funds to help American small business, it actually goes to those small businesses they're supposed to go to. We know that the last administration, that's not what happened. Too much of small business relief funding, which was passed by the Congress, ended up in the hands of those who either didn't need it or criminal syndicates who outright stole the money. Not only did the Trump administration let the biggest businesses with the teams of lawyers and accountants skip to the front of the line, my predecessor undermined the watchdogs who were supposed to be on the job to make sure relief went to mom and pop businesses who were supposed to get it in the first place. In my State of the Union address, I made it clear the watchdogs are back. And that's why the Justice Department named a chief prosecutor for pandemic fraud, who got to work right away. In June of this year, the chief prosecutor told Congress that it was essential to extend the statute of limitations for certain pandemic fraud to extend to 10 years to make sure fraudsters can't run out the clock. Congress acted, and today I'm signing 2 bipartisan bills that will give the federal and local prosecutors more time to hold criminals accountable for defrauding the American people during a once-in-a-century pandemic. Look, the American people deserve to know that their tax dollars are being spent as intended. My message to those cheats out there is this: you can't hide. We're going to find you. We're going to make you pay back what you stole and hold you accountable under the law. I want to thank the members of both parties in the House and Senate for getting these bills to my desk. And now, I'm going to sign them into law as proof of another piece of my economic plan. The belief that in the United States of America there is nothing beyond our capacity. Nothing when we work together as the United States of America. That's what these bills represent. We work together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
I'm giving today's jobs number.
Okay. Just signed the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, and Bank Fraud Enforcement Harmonization Act. Now I'm going to sign the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Fraud Statute of Limitations. Yeah, thank you very much. I know it's hot out here for you all, but thank you.
Can you give us a comment on Brittany Griner, sir?
I'm hopeful. We're working hard.
Do you need to talk to President Xi again to this new sentence?
Well, I'll tell you what, Detroit's making some really hot vehicles. They even got a Hummer that can go 4.1, 0 to 60. That's faster than my Corvette. Now, my Corvette's older than I am almost. But what I realize is that my Corvette's now worth a hell of a lot more than when I bought it. I got it original, $5,700. They tell me it's worth a lot of money. But I know if I ever sell it, Bo will come down from heaven and smite me down. But at any rate. And by the way, that new Corvette, that's electric Corvette, I got a commitment that I don't think I'm going to be able to enforce, that I get to buy the first one because it's going to be out before I'm out of office. So, but at any rate, look, folks, Chuck, you've done a hell of a job. You really have. You really have. And Speaker Pelosi, you always get it done. You always get it done. Come hell or high water, you get it done. And I want to thank Secretary Raimondo. And Josh, thank you for the introduction. Josh loves electric cars. He graduated from Syracuse. He's my kind of guy. What more do you need? Syracuse and electric cars. Look, this bill I'm about to sign into law, in my view, represents what I've always believed. America is the only nation in the world, and I believe this every fiber in my being, the only nation in the world that can be defined, as I've told Xi Jinping several years ago, by a single word. He asked me to define America for him when I was in China, and he and I were alone in the Tibetan Plateau. I said, I can do it in one word, and I mean it. Possibilities. In America, everything is possible. We believe every and anything is possible. It's part of the soul of this country. I mean, it really is. We can channel all our resources. Most of all, we can channel the full talents of all our people into a greater measure of hope and opportunity for our nation and for the world. To create good jobs, empower workers, grow the economy, not just for the wealthy, but grow for everyone. To change the course of human health and disease. To tackle climate crisis with innovation and jobs. To lead the world, this is not hyperbole, lead the world in future industries and protect our national security. We've always gotten it, we haven't always gotten it right, but we've never walked away from that sense of possibility that drives this country. Never. Now, it matters today, I think, more than anything in a very long, long time. You're tired of hearing me say this, those who work with me so closely, but that's because we face an inflection point in our nation and around the world. Fundamental change is taking place today, politically, economically, and technologically. Change that can either strengthen our sense of control and security, of dignity and pride in our lives and our nation, or change that weakens us so the people are left behind, causing them to question whether or not the very institutions, our economy, our democracy itself can still deliver for them, for everybody. This is the moment we face. I really mean this. I believe with every fiber of my being. We hear all the noise out there. We know there are those who focus more on seeking power than securing the future, than securing the future. Those who seek division instead of strength and unity, who tear down rather than build up. Today is a day for builders. Today, America is delivering. And I honest to God believe that 50, 75, 100 years from now, from people who will look back on this week, they'll know that we met this moment. Today I'm signing the law of the Chips and Science Act, a once-in-a-generation investment in America itself, a law that the American people can be proud of. I called for elements of this law when I first came to office. I want to thank everyone here who helped make it possible. Vice President Harris and the second gentleman, members of the Cabinet and the White House team, members of the United States Congress of both parties, the Majority Leader, Senators Cantwell, Young, Portman. I don't want to get you in trouble, but you did a hell of a job. By the way, he's a good man. That's a different story. I just probably cost him. I apologize. All kidding aside, thank you. Thank you. And along with Senators Cornyn and Wicker, helped keep this bill on track beginning to end. In the House, I thank Speaker Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and Representative Eddie Bernice, God love you. You're sitting there, you're ready, you did it all, you moved. Frank Pallone. I keep reminding Frank he's from New Jersey, but Delaware owns to the high water mark on the shore of New Jersey. We had a court case about that. I just want you to know that. Mike McCall, Doris Matsui, and the man who holds the seat I used to hold, Chris Coons. Look, so many other Democrats and Republicans alike are committed to getting this bill done. And while the bipartisanship in Congress is critical, I also want to acknowledge something else. Look at the people here today. You come from all different backgrounds to support this bill. Governors, like the governor of Illinois who I see, legislators, mayors, state legislators, entrepreneurs, business people, labor. They're the reason why we're here. They're the reason why we got this far. Scientists, technologists, engineers, physicians, presidents of four-year and community colleges, both, civil rights leaders, national security leaders, government officials. I met with many of you through this process. So many of you have spent years and years calling for key investments that are made in this bill. For years you've been calling for it. You helped make it happen. You represent why we are better positioned than any other nation in the world to win the economic competition of the 21st century. You're the reason why I'm so optimistic about the future of our country. You know, the Chips and Science Act supercharges our efforts to make semiconductors here in America. Excuse me, those tiny computer chips, smaller than a fingertip, that are the building blocks for our modern economy, powering everything from smartphones to dishwashers, automobiles. In fact, there are as many as 3,000 semiconductors per vehicle made today, 3,000 per vehicle. America invented the semiconductors. They powered NASA's mission to the moon. Federal research and development brought down the cost of making them and built a market and an entire industry. As a result, over 30 years ago, America had 40% of the global production of these chips. And then something happened. American manufacturing, the backbone of our economy, was hollowed out. We let semiconductor manufacturing go overseas. And as a result, today, we barely produce 10% of the semiconductors, excuse me, despite being the leader in chips design as well as research. And as we saw during the pandemic, when factories that make these chips shut down, the global economy comes to a screeching halt, driving up costs for families and everyone, not just here, but around the world. 1/3 of the core inflation last year was due to the higher price for automobiles. And a shortage of semiconductors. Folks, we need to make these chips here in America to bring down everyday costs and create jobs. Don't take my word for it. Listen to some of the business leaders here today and across the country. They're making decisions right now about where to invest and ramp up production for these semiconductors. Many are foreigners making investments, companies deciding where in the world to go, and they've chosen the United States of America. They look at China, Japan, South Korea, the European Union, all making historic investments of billions of dollars to attract the businesses to their countries to produce these chips. But these industry leaders also see America is back and leading the way. During my State of the Union, I described the Field of Dreams on 1,000 acres outside of Columbus, Ohio, where America's future will be built. Intel, whose CEO is here today, PACT Gelsinger, is here today. He's going to break ground in the next generation semiconductor factory in Central Ohio early this fall. American company Micron is announcing today that because of this law, it's going to invest $40 billion over 10 years to build factories and special chips called memory chips that store information on your smartphone. Investment. This investment alone is going to create 40,000 jobs. Excuse me, I'm sorry, and increase market share in memory chips by 500%. 2 more American companies. I want to take another sip of water. 2 other companies, Global Foundries and Qualcomm, announced yesterday a $4 billion partnership to produce chips in the U.S. that would otherwise have gone overseas. Qualcomm is one of the world's largest buyers of chips. It's planning to increase its chip production by up to 50% over the next 5 years. These companies see what I see, that the future of the chip industry is going to be made in America. And for folks at home, there's a broader supply chain that makes these semiconductors that connect countless other small businesses and manufacturers. This law funds the entire semiconductor supply chain for research and development to key inputs like polysilicon manufactured by a factory in Hemlock, New York. Nearly 1/3 of all the chips in the world use polysilicon made in Hemlock. Imagine if we had more of these kinds of factories across the country. This law will make that a reality. There's analysis that says investment in the CHIPS and Science Act will create more than 1 million construction jobs alone over the next 6 years, building semiconductor factories in America. America invented the semiconductor, has been mentioned already, and this law brings it back home. It's in our economic interest, and it's in our national security interest to do so. Earlier this year, I went down to Lockheed's factory in Alabama, where they're making the Javelin missiles that we're supplying Ukraine to defend themselves against Putin's unprovoked war. And it's crystal clear we need these semiconductors not only for those Javelin missiles, but also for weapon systems of the future that are going to be even more reliant on advanced chips. Unfortunately, we produce 0% of these advanced chips now, and China is trying to move away ahead of us and manufacture these sophisticated chips as well. It's no wonder the Chinese Communist Party actively lobbied U.S. business against this bill. The United States must lead the world in the production of these advanced chips. This law will do exactly that. And to be clear, this law is not handing out blank checks to companies. Today, I'm ordering my administration to be laser focused on the guardrails that will protect taxpayers' dollars. It means making sure that companies partner with community colleges and technical schools to offer training and apprenticeship programs and work with small and minority-owned businesses. They'll have the power to take back any federal funding if companies don't meet these commitments required by the bill. This includes requirements that companies building these semiconductor facilities pay Davis-Bacon prevailing wage to ensure the tens of thousands of new construction jobs are union jobs. We'll not allow companies to use these funds to buy back stock or issue dividends. And finally, this bill is about more than chips. It's about science as well. Decades ago, we used to invest 2% of our GDP that led the world in everything. We led the world in everything from internet to the GPS. Today, we invest less than 1%. We used to rank #1 in the world in research and development. Now we rank number 9. China was number 8 decades ago. Now they are number 2. And other countries are closing in fast. This law gets moving up once again. It authorizes funding to boost our research and development funding, closer to 1% of the GDP, the fastest single-year percentage increase in 70 years, and it's going to make a difference. This increased research and development funding is going to ensure the United States leads the world in the industries of the future, from quantum computing to artificial intelligence to advanced biotechnology, kinds of investments that will deliver vaccines for cancer cures, for HIV, invent the next gen big things that hadn't even been imagined yet. A law that requirements that any company that receives federal research development will have to make that technology they're inventing here in America. That means we'll invest in America and invent in America and make it in America. We're going to make sure we include all of America, supporting entrepreneurs and technological hubs across America, including historic black colleges and universities, minority-serving institutions, tribal colleges. We're going to tap into our greatest competitive advantage, our diverse and talented workforce, urban, rural, suburban, and tribal. And people like Josh came up with this idea for portable electric car chargers 5 years ago in Buffalo, New York. And all the young people out there today who have an idea that spark of imagination to solve a problem they see, to cure a disease they have, to dream to make the impossible possible. This law is for them. Let me close with this. Last month I awarded Steve Jobs Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously. At every turn of his life, he dared to think differently, embodied that most of American questions. What next? The CHIPS and Science Act is going to inspire a whole new generation of Americans to answer that question. What next? Right now, as Bill can tell you, NASA has a mission going back to the moon, then to Mars, the sun, and beyond, capturing images of distant galaxies we could only once dream existed and we could never think we could see. The CHIPS and Science Act captures that magic here on Earth. It also builds on the progress we've made to rebuild America's with the historic infrastructure law that I signed last year that's going to modernize our roads, our bridges, and deliver clean water, high-speed internet for every American. It builds on another, one of my many top priorities, creation of an advanced research projects agency in health, for health, ARPA-H. It's going to transform how we detect, treat, cure diseases like Alzheimer's, diabetes, and cancer. And tomorrow, I'm signing the most significant law ever to help veterans suffering from exposure to toxins from burn pits. And soon, I hope to be signing the Inflation Reduction Act into law that's going to lower the cost of health care and energy and make historic investments to tackle climate crisis. Once that law is signed, any senior, by the first of the year, no matter how high if they're on Medicare, no matter how high their drug bills are, will never have to pay more than $2,000 a year. Just one specific example, beginning in January. There's a lot going to happen. And for all the division in our country, we're showing ourselves in the world that we can take on the biggest challenges. We can take on the special interest, and our democracy can deliver for the people of this country. That's why I'm confident that decades from now, people are going to look back at this week with all we've passed and all we've moved on, that we met the moment at this inflection point in history. A moment when we bet on ourselves, believed in ourselves, and recaptured the story, the spirit, and the soul of this nation. We are the United States of America, a singular place of possibilities. I'm not going to go sign the CHIPS and Science Act, and once again, I promise you, we're leading the world again for the next decades. Thank you. It's awful hard, I know. I apologize. Well, you made it. You got a long way to go. We have to get the word out. Okay. Ready? Got it?
It's slow.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please. Never played that long. Well, thank you all very much, and good afternoon. Vice President Harris and First Gentleman, well, actually the second gentleman, but you're really my first gentleman, and ambassadors, members of Congress, thank you all for being here today. I think it's a pretty big day. Just a few months ago, I welcomed President Niinistö of Finland and the Prime Minister Andersson of Sweden to the White House to demonstrate the strong support the United States had for Finland and Sweden's decision to apply for membership in NATO. And two proud and independent countries, each with a long tradition of non-alignment, exercising their sovereign right to make their own decisions about their own security, and responding to the will of their citizens, following the democratic processes they have, choosing to join NATO. It was and is a watershed moment, I believe, in the alliance, and for the greater security and stability, not only of Europe and the United States, but of the world. And today, we take another important step toward bringing Sweden and Finland in NATO. In just a few minutes, I'm going to sign the U.S. Instrument of Ratification, making the United States the 23rd ally to approve Sweden and Finland's membership to the strongest, most powerful defensive alliance in the history of the world. I've just gotten off the phone with both the President and the Prime Minister. They send their best. And to offer my congratulations on the enormous progress thus far. Together, we committed that the United States, Finland, and Sweden would continue to remain vigilant against any threats to our shared security and deter any confrontation and confront any aggression or threat of aggression that might come up. And I urge the remaining allies to complete their own ratification progress as quickly as possible. For more than 7 decades, a strong, united NATO has been the foundation of American security, not just in Europe, but quite frankly, the basis of our security around the world. It's how we've led the world together with those nations that share our vision and, even more importantly, our values. It's critical now to deter threats before they harm our people, our allies, and our interest. You know, it's how we address instability and aggression, with allies at our side, amplifying the capacity to respond effectively. Sweden and Finland have strong democratic institutions, strong militaries, and strong and transparent economies. They'll meet every NATO requirement. We're confident of that. And we will make our alliance stronger, and we'll make America and the American people safer in the process. That's why the United States Senate gave their advice and consent to Sweden and Finland's membership with overwhelming support, 95 votes in favor, a near record pace. This year, we're celebrating significant bipartisan steps that are going to make our country stronger and enhance our ability to lead the world. We're showing the world that the United States of America can still do big things. This nearly unanimous bipartisan ratification sends another important message. The United States is committed. The United States is committed to the transatlantic alliance. Together with our allies and partners, we're going to write the future we want to see, the future we want to see. And in a moment when Putin's Russia has shattered peace and security in Europe, when autocrats are challenging the very foundations of a rule-based order, the strength of the transatlantic alliance and America's commitment to NATO is more important than it's ever been. That's why in June in Madrid, at a pivotal NATO summit, all 30 nations came together to invite Finland and Sweden to apply. It was a display of allied unity, allied strength, and allied resolve. Proof that NATO's door remains open to countries in Europe that share our values and that meet the high standards of our alliance. Putin thought he could break us apart when this all started. He believed he could break us apart, in my view, weaken our resolve. Instead, he's getting exactly what he did not want. He wanted the Finlandization of NATO, but he's getting the NATOization of Finland along with Sweden. I really mean it. In seeking to join NATO, Finland and Sweden are making a sacred commitment that an attack against one is an attack against all. It's Article 5 of the Washington Treaty and the core, the very core of our alliance. And our allies committed to Article 5 and is stronger than ever, that commitment. The only time in history Article 5 has been invoked was on 9/11, when the United States was attacked, and all our allies rallied to our side. The United States will never forget that, and we will never fail in our pledge to defend every inch of NATO. That's why, together with our allies, we're taking steps to reinforce NATO's eastern flank and strengthen our deterrence against any threats of aggression toward the alliance. You know, and we're going to be better able to meet the new challenges of a changed European security environment with two strong, reliable, highly capable new allies in the high north. You know, NATO was formed out of the wreckage of World War II, as we all know, where war, you know, it had, look, just be straight about it. Wars have repeatedly riven the continent, engulfed the world in conflicts, and there's no way to avoid that if we're not together. NATO laid a new foundation for lasting peace and security. And through more than 7 decades that follows, NATO has proved the indispensable alliance committed to Europe whole, free, and at peace. Today, we see all too clearly how NATO remains an indispensable alliance for the world of today and the world of tomorrow. Our alliance is closer than ever. It is more united than ever. And when Finland and Sweden bring the number of allies to 32, we'll be stronger than ever, stronger than ever. And this will benefit all our people, all of our people. Now I'm going to go over to that table there and sign a U.S. instrument of ratification, communicating the support of the United States for Finland and Sweden's membership in NATO. And thank you all for being here. And I want to ask the ambassadors whether they're willing to come up and stand with me while I sign it. Okay? Thank you. All right. Okay, here we go. Let me see.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats until
Please have a seat. Danielle, thank you. Before I begin today, I want to say a word about the news that came out today relative to the economy. Actually, I just want to say a number: 0. Today, we received news that our economy had 0% inflation in the month of July. 0%. Here's what that means. While the price of some things went up last month, the price of other things went down by the same amount. The result, 0 inflation last month, but people are still hurting, but 0 inflation last month. Economists look at a measure of inflation that ignores food and energy prices, and they call it core inflation. That's about the lowest amount in several years, several months. When you couple that with last week's booming jobs report of 528,000 jobs created last month and 3.5% unemployment, it underscores the kind of economy we've been building. We're seeing a stronger labor market where jobs are booming and Americans are working, and we're seeing some signs that inflation may be beginning to moderate. That's what happens when you build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out. The wealthy do very well and everyone has a chance. It gives everyone a chance to make progress. Now I want to be clear. With the global challenges we face, from the war in Europe to disruption of supply chains and pandemic shutdowns in Asia, we could face additional headwinds in the months ahead. Our work is far from over, but 2 things should be clear. First, the economic plan is working, and second is building an economy that will reward work. Wages are up this month, provide opportunity, help the middle class, and still have work to do, but we're on track. The second point I want to make is we need to pass the Inflation Reduction Act right away. That's the most consequential thing that Congress can do to keep our progress on inflation from getting better, from getting worse, keep it moving in the right direction. And it will bring down the cost of prescription drugs, health insurance premiums, and energy costs. It's going to make big corporations just pay their fair share, nothing more than their fair share. It's going to reduce the deficit without raising a penny in taxes on people making under $400,000 a year. But it's far from done in our effort to bring inflation down, but we're moving in the right direction. So some good economic news today and some work ahead. Now to the reason we're here, and the most important reason that we've assembled in this room in a long time. Danielle, when you were here for the State of the Union, I had hoped you'd be back to sign this for this bill signing. It turns out that's working. And Mom, I remember how strongly supportive you were of this from the very beginning, all the way back when I met you at a book signing a long time ago. And I'm just in awe of your family's courage. I really mean that. You know, through the pain, you found purpose to demand that we do better as a nation. And today we are. Brielle, you know, I know you miss your daddy, but he's with you all the time. He's inside you. He's going to whisper in your ear lots of times when you have hard decisions to make. You're going to wonder what Daddy wants you to do, and he's going to be there. He's going to be there for you. You see that little guy you're sitting right next to? That's my grandson. His daddy lost to the same burn pits, and he knows what you're going through. But guess what? You're going to do this. You're going to be really, really strong. And it's hard taking care of Mommy and a grandmom, but you got to do it, okay? All right. And to the veterans and their families here today and for all around the country, we can never fully thank you for your service and your sacrifice. And that's not hyperbole, that's a literal fact. Less than 1% of you, risk everything to defend 99% of the population. 1% risk 99%. We owe you. You're the backbone, you're the steel, you're the sinew, you're the very fiber that makes this country what it is. And that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. As a nation, we have many obligations. I've been saying this for a long, long time. We have many obligations, but only one truly sacred obligation: to equip those we send into harm's way and to care for them and their families when they come home. We have a lot of obligations, but that's a truly sacred obligation we have. Today, Today, we're one step closer to fulfilling that sacred obligation with the bill I'm about to sign into law. This is the most significant law our nation has ever passed to help millions of veterans who are exposed to toxic substances during their military services. You know, Secretary McDonough can tell you, I was going to get this done come hell or high water. This was something, the first thing, even when a lot of staff knows that's true. It was part of my agenda that I announced in the State of the Union address. I announced 4 things that all Americans could agree on. One was beating the opioid epidemic. 2 was tackling the mental health crisis we face as a nation as a consequence of the pandemic. 3 was ending cancer as we know it, which we're going to do and come hell or high water again. And 3, supporting our veterans. Big issues that unite us. We're always being told that Democrats and Republicans can't work together. When I ran, I said one of the reasons I was running, one of the 3 reasons was to unite the country, and I was roundly criticized for being naive. That was the old days, Joe. You used to be able to do that. Well, guess what? I don't believe it. We never have failed to. There are a lot of issues we can disagree on, but there are issues we can work together on. And this is one of those issues. So many of you here today remind us that we have fought for this for so many years. Veterans, surviving families, surviving family members, advocates like Rosie Torres and John Stewart. And John, I want to thank you again. I wanted to come up and hang out in the Capitol steps. The Secret Service said I'd be a pain in the neck. They wouldn't let me do it. So at least we did a little video on there. But what you've done, John, matters. And you know it does. You should know. It really, really matters. You refuse to let anybody forget. Refuse to let them forget. And we owe you big, man. We owe you big. And all the rest of you, you never gave up the fight. You never quit. You didn't stop, no matter what you were told. Think about it. Think about how distant this looked 5 years ago, 7 years ago. I also want to thank Senators Tester and Jerry Morgan. By the way, if you're in a foxhole, you want someone with you, you want Tester in that hole with you. Where are you, John? John here? Only problem is John may try to bring his combine in that foxhole with him. Also, John Bozeman and Kristen Gillibrand and Dick Blumenthal, Representatives Takano and Bost, and all the other members of Congress who supported this bill, many of whom are here today. I'd like you all to stand, all the members of Congress, please stand. You know, we learned a horrible lesson in Vietnam in which many of you fought. After Vietnam, how harmful effects to exposure of Agent Orange took years to manifest itself in their veterans, leaving too many veterans unable to access the care they needed and deserved. That's why back in 1991, I, along with others, co-sponsored the Agent Orange Act, supporting veterans exposed to toxic substances in Vietnam. That laid the groundwork for how the VA addresses environmental exposure and the bill that I'm about to sign. You know, veterans of the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan not only faced dangers in battle, they were breathing toxic smoke from burn pits. Because I was vice president and the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee before that, I was in and out of Iraq over 20 times, and in Fort Bonneville and all those places, and you could actually see some of it in the air. Burn pits the size of football fields that incinerated wastes of war such as tires, poisonous chemicals, jet fuel, and so much more I won't even mention. And a lot of the hooches, a lot of the places where our soldiers were sleeping were literally a quarter mile, half mile away from it, and where they ate their chow. I mean, it was there all the time. And toxic smoke, thick with poison, spreading through the air and into the lungs of our troops. When they came home, many of the fittest and best warriors that we sent to war were not the same. Headaches, numbness, dizziness, cancer. My son Bo was one of them. Bo's son Hunter is here today, as I mentioned earlier, and his father-in-law and a good friend of mine going all the way back to high school, Ronnie Olivier, along with General Frank Vavala, who was the commander of the National Guard when Bo was there. And I want to thank them for being here as well. To us and to many of you in the room, if not all of you, it's personal. Personal for so many people like Danielle and Brielle. Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson, just 39 years old. 39 years old. And they held his hand for the last time at age 39. A PACT Act is the least we can do for the countless men and women, many of whom may be in this room for all I know, who suffered toxic exposure while serving their country. The law expands access to health care and disability benefits for veterans harmed by toxic exposure. It empowers the Department of Veterans Affairs to move quickly to determine service members' illness and related military service to see if they qualify. And for families of veterans who died from toxic exposure, it means a monthly stipend of $2,000 a month for a surviving spouse with 2 children. It means access to life insurance, home loan insurance, tuition benefits, and help with health care. It means new facilities, improved care, more research, and increased hiring and retention of health care workers treating veterans. This new law matters. It matters a lot. It matters a great deal because these conditions have already taken such a toll on so many veterans and their families. I've directed the Department of Veterans Affairs to treat all 23 presumptive conditions as in this law as applicable the moment I sign this bill. I'm urging the veterans of those decades of war to promptly file for your claims. The VA will move as quickly as possible to resolve your claim and get you the benefits and the care you've earned. And now I want every member, every service member, every veteran, every family member to know how to access the law. Just go to va.gov/PACT, va.gov/PACT. File their claim and apply for your VA health care now. Or go to your local VA hospital or reach out to the veteran service organizations, many of whom made this happen as well, from Disabled American Veterans to the American Legion to Veterans of Foreign War. And if you need additional assistance, just call. And this law becomes on top of my administration's efforts to pioneer ways to link toxic exposure to diseases and help more veterans get the care they need. We're building a more comprehensive database for the Department of Defense and Veterans Affairs to track and assess exposures. Expand the eligibility for veterans suffering from the 3 respiratory conditions and 9 rare respiratory cancers. Earlier this summer, I signed 9 veterans bills into law that will do everything from providing mammograms and screenings for veterans who served near burn pits to compensating veterans who developed cancer and medical conditions from our World War II nuclear program. We're not stopping just here. Secretary McDonough and the Department of Veterans Affairs are part of my Cancer Moonshot initiative to end cancer as we know it. And today, I'm proud to name Dr. Monica get it right, Doc. Bettignoli. I better get it right because I married Dominic Giacoppa's daughter, so I got a problem, okay? But she's a leading cancer surgeon from a family of generations of veterans and is my new director of the National Cancer Institute. Please stand, Doc. And they're all working as one team. We may be in separate departments, but as one team. And perhaps one of the most important things we're doing is working to bring down the rate of suicide among service members and veterans. An average of 17 veterans die by suicide every single day. 17. It's an absolute tragedy and demands not only a whole-of-government approach, but a whole-of-country working together. So let me close with this. As Commander-in-Chief, I've always have your back, I promise you. That includes finally delivering justice to Zawahiri, al-Qaeda's leader and bin Laden's deputy during 9/11, and includes always fighting for the care and benefits you've more than earned and more than deserve. This law is long overdue, but we finally got it done together. And I don't want to hear the press tell me Democrats and Republicans can't work together. We got it done, and we got it done together. So God bless you all. You are the backbone, the very spine of this country. And may God protect our troops. Now I'm going to walk over and sign that legislation. That's okay. All right. Thank you, Majority Leader Schumer. Chuck, you've been a good friend a long, long time. And Joe, I never had a doubt. Joe had an operation on his shoulder. I just want you to know it wasn't because of anything we did. He's in great shape. And our whip, Mr. Clyburn, you're amazing. And I am reminded often by my staff, were not for you, your wife telling you to endorse me, I wouldn't be standing here. But thank you very, very much. And also Congresswoman Castor and my good friend Frank Pallone, Congressman Pallone. Thank you for your leadership. You know, while they couldn't be here, I especially want to thank Nancy Pelosi, who was instrumental in this law, and Vice President Harris for an incredible work she did. And I'm about to sign the Inflation Reduction Act into law, one of the most significant laws in our history. Let me say from the start, with this law, the American people won and the special interests lost. The American people won and the special interests lost. We're in a session of, for a while, people doubted whether any of that was going to happen. But we are in a season of substance. This administration began amid a dark time in America. As Jim said, a once-in-a-century pandemic, devastating joblessness, clear and present threats to democracy and the rule of law, doubts about America's future itself. And yet, we've not wavered, we've not flinched, and we've not given in. Instead, we're delivering results for the American people. We didn't tear down, we built up, we didn't look back, we looked forward. And today offers further proof that the soul of America is vibrant, the future of America is bright, and the promise of America is real and just beginning. The bill I'm about to sign is not just about today, it's about tomorrow. It's about delivering progress and prosperity to American families. It's about showing the American and the American people that democracy still works in America, notwithstanding all the talk of its demise. Not just for the privileged few, but for all of us. You know, I swore an oath of office to you and to God to faithfully execute the duties of this sacred office. To me, the critical duty of the President is to defend what is best about America. And that's not hyperbole. Defend what's best about America, to pursue justice, to ensure fairness, deliver results that create possibilities that all of us can live a life of consequence and prosperity in a nation that's safe and secure. That's the job. Fulfilling that pledge to you guides me every single hour of every single day in this job. You know, presidents should be judged not only by our words, but by our deeds. Not by our rhetoric, but by our actions. Not by our promise, but by reality. And today is part of an extraordinary story that's being written by this administration and our brave allies in the Congress. This law that I'm about to sign finally delivers on a promise that Washington has made for decades to the American people. I got here as a 29-year-old kid. We were promising to make sure that Medicare would have the power to negotiate lower drug prices back then. Back then, prescription drug prices. But guess what? We're giving Medicare the power to negotiate those prices now on some drugs. This means seniors are going to pay less for the prescription drugs, while we're changing circumstances for people in Medicare by putting a cap of a maximum of $2,000 a year on their prescription drug costs, no matter what the reason for those prescriptions are. That means if you're on Medicare, you'll never have to pay more than $2,000 a year, no matter how many prescriptions you have, whether it's for cancer or any other disease. No more than $2,000 a year. And you all know it because a lot of you come from families that need this. This is a godsend. This is a godsend to many families, and so long overdue. The Inflation Reduction Act locks in place lower health care premiums for millions of families who get their coverage under the Affordable Care Act. Last year, a family of four saved on average $2,400 through the American Rescue Plan that I signed into law that the Congress voted in place. In the years ahead, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, 13 million people are going to continue to save an average of $800 a year on health insurance. The Inflation Reduction Act invests $369 billion to take the most aggressive action ever in confronting the climate crisis and strengthening our energy security. It's going to offer working families thousands of dollars in savings by providing them rebates to buy new and efficient appliances, weatherize their homes, get tax credit for purchasing heat pumps and rooftop solar, electric stoves, ovens, dryers. It gives consumers a tax credit to buy electric vehicles or fuel cell vehicles, new or used. And it gives them a tax credit of up to $7,500 if those vehicles were made in America. American auto companies, along with American labor, are committing their treasure and their talent, billions of dollars in investment to make electric vehicles and battery and electric charging stations all across America. Made in America. All of it made in America. This new law also provides tax credits that's going to create tens of thousands of good-paying jobs and clean energy manufacturing jobs, solar factories in the Midwest and the South, wind farms across the plains and off our shores, clean hydrogen projects, and more all across America, every part of America. This bill is the biggest step forward on climate ever, and it's going to allow us to boldly take additional steps toward meeting all of my climate goals, the ones we set out when we ran. It includes ensuring that we create clean energy opportunities in frontline and fence-line communities that have been smothered by the legacy of pollution, and fight environmental injustice that's been going on for so long. And here's another win for the American people. In addition to cutting the deficit by $350 billion last year, in my first year in office, and cutting at $1.7 trillion this fiscal year. We're going to cut the deficit, point out, by another $300 billion with the Inflation Reduction Act over the next decade. We're cutting deficits to fight inflation by having the wealthy and big corporations finally begin to pay part of their fair share. Big corporations will now pay a minimum of 15% tax instead of us 55 of them got away with paying $0 in federal income tax on $40 billion in profit. And I'm keeping my campaign commitment. No one, let me emphasize, no one earning less than $400,000 a year will pay a penny more in federal taxes. Folks, the Inflation Reduction Act does so many things that for so many years, so many of us have fought to make happen. And let's be clear. In this historic moment, Democrats sided with the American people, and every single Republican in the Congress sided with the special interest in this vote. Every single one. In fact, the big drug companies spent nearly $100 million to defeat this bill. $100 million. And remember, every single Republican in Congress voted against this bill. Every single Republican in Congress voted against lowering prescription drug prices, against lowering health care costs, against the fairer tax system. Every single Republican, every single one, voted against tackling the climate crisis, against lowering our energy costs, against creating good-paying jobs. My fellow Americans, that's the choice we face. We can protect the already powerful or show the courage to build a future where everybody has an even shot. That's the America I believe in. That's what I believe in. And today, we've come a step closer to making that America real. Today, too often, we confuse noise with substance. Too often, we confuse setbacks with defeat. Too often, we hand the biggest microphones to the critics and the cynics who delight in declaring failure, while those committed to making real progress do the hard work of governing. Making progress in this country as big and complicated as ours clearly is not easy. It's never been easy. But with unwavering conviction, commitment, and patience, progress does come. Your dad was right. And when it does, like today, people's lives are made better, and the future becomes brighter, and a nation can be transformed. That's what's happening now. From the American Rescue Plan that helped create nearly 10 million new jobs, to once-in-a-generation infrastructure law that will rebuild America's roads, bridges, ports, deliver clean water, high-speed internet to every American, to the first meaningful gun safety law in 30 years. And if I have anything to do with it, we're still going to have an assault weapons ban, but that's another story. And to get significant veterans health care law in decades for the first time, to a groundbreaking chips and science law that's going to ensure that technologies and jobs of the future are made here in America. In America. And all this progress is part of our vision and plan and determined effort to get the job done for the American people, so they can look their child in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to make it sure that the democracy delivers for your generation, because I think that's at stake. And now, I know there are those here today who hold a dark and despairing view of this country. I'm not one of them. I believe in the promise of America. I believe in the future of this country. I believe in the very soul of this nation. And most of all, I believe in you, the American people. I believe to my core, there isn't a single thing this country cannot do when we put our mind to it. We just have to remember who we are. We are the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity. That's why so many foreign companies decide to invest or make chips in America. Billions of dollars. We're the best. We have to believe in ourselves again. And now I'm going to take action that I've been looking forward to doing for 18 months. I'm going to sign the Inflation Reduction Act.
Please sit. Thank you.
You try. Just make sure you get the right one. All right. Okay. Here you go.
It's now law.
Let me begin by thanking my team here. They did one heck of a job in averting what could have been a real disaster, and ended up with a good product. But we still have more work to do, in my view, in terms of ultimately getting paid sick leave, not just for rail workers, but for every worker in America. That's a goal I had in the beginning, and I'm coming back at it. So, but good morning. The bill I'm about to sign ends a difficult rail dispute and helps our nation avoid what, without a doubt, would have been an economic catastrophe at a very bad time in the calendar. Our nation's rail system is literally the backbone of our supply chain, as you all well know, and so much of what we rely on is delivered on our rail, from clean water to food and gas and to every other good. Rail shutdown would have devastated our economy. Without freight rail, many of the U.S. industries would literally shut down. In the event of a shutdown, my economic advisors report that as many as 765,000 Americans, many of them union members themselves, would have been put out of work for the first time, and within the first 2 weeks of the strike alone. Communities could have lost access to chemicals necessary to ensure clean drinking water. Farms and ranches across the country would have been unable to feed their livestock. And thanks to the bill Congress passed, and one I'm about to sign, we've spared the country that catastrophe. At the same time, we ensured workers are going to get a historic 24% wage increase over the next 5 years, improved working conditions, and peace of mind around their health care. And look, I know this bill doesn't have paid sick leave that these rail workers and frankly every worker in America deserves. But that fight isn't over. I didn't commit we were going to stop just because we couldn't get it in this bill that we were going to stop fighting for it. I've supported paid sick leave for a long time. I'm going to continue that fight till we succeed. And I want to thank Congress, Democrats and Republicans, for acting so quickly. I know this was a tough vote for members of both parties. It was tough for me, but it was the right thing to do at the moment, to save jobs, to protect millions of working families from harm and disruption, and to keep supply chains stable around the holidays, and to continue the progress we've made and we've been continuing to see on the economy. For months, you couldn't look anywhere without seeing headlines screaming gas prices at the pump are up. But look, folks, gas prices are down, and you barely hear anything about it right now. They're continuing to go down, and there's a lot more that's going to happen. They're down more than $1.50 a gallon since the summer, and they continue to fall. And our economy continues to grow. The economic report, the GDP is up even more than it was previously thought. We continue to create jobs, lots of jobs. And today, we've learned that the economy added 263,000 jobs in November. Now, we've now created 10.5 million jobs since I took office, more than any administration in history at this point in the presidency. And 750,000 of them are domestic manufacturing jobs made in America. Unemployment rate remains near an all-time 50-year low, 3.7%. And wages for working families, I want to say this again, wages for working families, in fact, over the last couple months have gone up. These wage increases are larger than the increase in inflation during that same period of time. And so we're in a position now where things are moving. They're moving in the right direction. As we go into the holiday season, here's what this all means. The Americans are working, the economy is growing, wages are rising faster than inflation, and we've avoided a catastrophic rail strike. It means our plan to build the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. You're tired of hearing me say that, but it's working. And the wealthy are still doing very well while the middle class and the poor are having a shot. I want to thank Congress once again for being partners today, for averting this disaster and keeping our economy on a stable footing during the holiday season. I want to thank you all, and I'm going to reach over here and sign this bill and make it official. This is the House Joint Resolution 100. Okay. By the way, I really can't emphasize enough how much I appreciate the team behind me, working with business and labor to get this done and avoid this, but otherwise it's a really good bill lacking only one thing. And we're going to get that one thing done before it's all over. But anyway, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Mr. President, why don't you go to Georgia to help Senator Warnock?
I'm going to Georgia today to help Senator Warren, not to Georgia. I'm going to help Senator Warren for them doing a major fundraiser up in Boston today for our next and continued Senate candidate and senator. Thank you.
President, how soon should rail workers expect sick days?
To buy oil and refill the strategic reserves, Mr.
As
President?
soon as I can convince our Republicans to see light.
And is it time for the U.S. government to step in to prevent the spread of hate?
Hello, hello, hello! Today's a good day. A day America takes a vital step toward equality, toward liberty and justice, not just for some, but for everyone. Everyone. Toward creating a nation where decency, dignity, and love are recognized, honored, and protected. Today, I sign the Respect for Marriage Act into law. Deciding whether to marry, who to marry, is one of the most profound decisions a person can make. And as I've said before, and some of you might remember, on a certain TV show 10 years ago, I got in trouble. Marriage, I mean this with all my heart, marriage is a simple proposition. Who do you love? And will you be loyal to that person you love? It's not more complicated than that. And the law recognizes that everyone should have the right to answer those questions for themselves without the government interference. It also secures the federal rights, protections that come with marriage. Like when your loved one gets sick and you've legally recognized as a next of kin. For most of our nation's history, we denied interracial couples and same-sex couples from these protections. We failed to treat them with equal dignity and respect. And now, the law requires that interracial marriage and same-sex marriage must be recognized as legal in every state in the nation. I want to thank all of you for being here today, for being part of this important movement. Jill, Kamala, Doug, my cabinet members, including Pete Buttigieg. And a special thanks to our performers, Joy, Sam, and Cindy. Look, you know, in the Gay Men's Choir of Washington, D.C., Gay Men's Marriage Choir, and the members of Congress here today, in the Senate, this bipartisan vote simply would not have happened without the leadership and persistence of a real hero, Tammy Baldwin, Senator Tammy Baldwin. And thank you, Susan Collins, who did not rest until this bill got done. And the leader, Schumer, Senators Portman, Sinema, Tillis, Feinstein, Booker. And in the House, this would not have happened, as much wouldn't happen without Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker. A equality and dignity for the LGBT community has always been her North Star. From her first speech on the House floor, pledging to end AIDS and signaling the bill and signing the bill today, all that time span. Madam Speaker, on behalf of all Americans, thank you for this and so much more for your decades of service. We also owe our special thanks to representatives like Jerry Nadler, who first introduced the Respect for Marriage Act a decade ago, David Cicilline, and Sharice Davids as leaders of the Equality Caucus, and so many others, many of whom are here today, who did what was right. Standing behind me are dozens of plaintiffs. Up there, don't jump. The dozens of plaintiffs who fought for marriage equality through the years, as well as families whose existence would not be possible without the bonds of love and this law honors and protects. Look, we're here today to celebrate their courage and everyone who made the day possible. Courage that led to progress we've seen over the decades, progress that gives us hope that every generation will continue our journey toward a more perfect union. On this day, I think of Mildred and Richard Loving, a young woman of color and a young white man. They met as family friends and eventually fell in love. In 1958, they drove to Washington, D.C. to get married because the relationship was illegal in Virginia. They went back home. 5 weeks later, police burst into their house and arrested them for the crime of being married, the crime of being married. They were sentenced to 1 year in prison unless they agreed to leave Virginia and not return for 25 years. They appealed the sentence, and it wasn't till 9 years later, in 1967, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled unanimously. It declared that laws against interracial marriage were unconstitutional. Today, we're joined by one of the lawyers who represented the Lovings and the widow of their other lawyer that took the fight to the highest court because they believed their love should not be criminalized but should be honored and respected. As Mildred Loving said, previous generations were, quote, bitterly divided over something that should have been so clear and right. So clear and right. No one could put it better. And later, Mildred fought something else that's so clear and right. Marriage equality for LGBTQ Americans. And today, we celebrate our progress from Hawaii, the first state to declare that denying marriage of same-sex couples is unconstitutional, to Massachusetts, the first state to legalize marriage equality for couples like Gina and Heidi, who you just heard from. To all the advocates excuse me, who worked to block or overturn state bans. As you heard earlier, Vice President Harris took a stand as Attorney General in California. Talked earlier. Others also spoke out. One of them was my son, Beau Biden, who was Attorney General of the state of Delaware, who filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court in favor of marriage equality and pushed to add gender identity protections into the law as well. Today, remember Edie Windsor and her partner, Thea. In 1965, they met in their 30s. They fell in love, secretly got engaged, and Edie wore an engagement pin rather than a ring to avoid questions. They had 40 wonderful years together. Then Thea was diagnosed with MS, and Edie became her full-time caregiver. They went to Canada. They got married. As Edie would say, don't postpone joy. And then Thea died soon after, grieving Edie learned, since their marriage wasn't legally recognized, she would have to pay $360,000 in estate taxes. Viewed as strangers rather than partners for 4 decades. Simply unconscionable and unacceptable. So Edie took her case to the Supreme Court and she won. Before Edie passed away, she fell in love again at age 87. Finally experienced the joy and dignity of legally recognized marriage to Judith. Judith is here today with us. Judith, are you up there? Also here today are many of the 16 plaintiffs in the same-sex marriage case that helped bring us here. They were subjected to intense public scrutiny and harassment, physical threats and violence for years as their cases made their way through the courts. Jim couldn't be here today, but he and I spoke on that day in June 2015 when he was on the steps of the United States Supreme Court. I called him right after that historic victory, a victory not just for the plaintiffs, but for the whole country, and I would argue for the world. My fellow Americans, the road to this moment has been long, but those who believe in equality and justice, you never gave up. Many of you standing on the South Lawn here. So many of you put your relationships on the line, your jobs on the line, your lives on the line to fight for the law I'm about to sign. For me and the entire nation, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's one thing for the Supreme Court to rule on a case, but it's another thing entirely if elected representatives of the people to take a vote on the floor of the United States Congress and say loudly and clearly, love is love, right is right, justice is justice. These things are fundamental things that America thinks matter. So sadly, we must also acknowledge another reason we're here. Congress is acting because an extreme Supreme Court has stripped away the right important to millions of Americans that existed for half a century. The Dobbs decision, the court's extreme conservative majority overturned Roe v. Wade and the right to choose. In his concurring opinion, Justice Thomas went even further, and he wrote the following, quote, "We should reconsider all the court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, Obergefell. That means he thinks we should reconsider whether you've got the right to access to contraception. And yes, we should reconsider whether you have the right to marry who you love. And that's not only the challenge ahead. When a person can be married in the morning and thrown out of a restaurant for being gay in the afternoon, this is still wrong. Wrong. And that's why the people you heard speak today continue to fight to pass the Equality Act. When hospitals, libraries, and community centers are threatened and intimidated, excuse me, because they support LGBTQ children and families, we have to speak out. We must stop the hate and violence, like we just saw in Colorado Springs, where a place of acceptance and celebration was targeted for violence and terror. We need to challenge the hundreds of callous and cynical laws introduced in the states targeting transgender children, terrifying families, and criminalizing doctors who give children the care they need. We have to protect these children so they know they are loved, and we will stand up for them and say they can seek for themselves. Folks, racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, they're all connected. But the antidote to hate is love. This law and the love it defends strike a blow against hate in all its forms. And that's why this law matters to every single American, no matter who you are or who you love. This shouldn't be about conservative or liberal, red or blue. No, this is about realizing the promise of the Declaration of Independence, a promise rooted in a sacred and secular beliefs, a promise that we're all created equal. We're all entitled to what Abraham Lincoln called an open field and a fair chance. You know, there's nothing more decent, more dignified, more American that we're about what we're doing here today. It's about who we are as a nation. It's about the substance of our laws. It's about being true to the best of the soul of America. Decency, dignity, love. Let me close with something else that happened on the same day that Congress sent me this bill. Brittany Griner was finally on her way home. I got to know her incredible wife as we worked to bring Brittany home from her unjust imprisonment in Russia. We were together in the Oval Office, her wife and I. We heard Brittany's voice on the phone when she was freed. And we addressed the nation together. When we did that, Brittany's wife said, quote, "Today, my family is whole. My fellow Americans, that all-consuming, life-altering, love and commitment, that's marriage. Thank you to everyone on the hard-fought victory generations in the making. It's been a long road, but we got it done. We're going to continue the work ahead, I promise you. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops." And now, let me sign the Respect for Marriage Act into law. Here. All right, here.
Yes, I did.
She was that day. Right, she was that day.
Here we go.